All right, and we are live. Welcome, everybody. This is what I believe will be the final installment of Academics Respond to Women Respond to the Men's Movement, where we read through essays from probably the worst book ever written, which is Women Respond to the Men's Movement, published in 1992. Yeah, and in this book, basically it didn't age well. It's a bunch of feminists responding to very early men's issues. I have two essays ready for today. The first one's called Beauty and the Beast, a parable of our time. But before we launch into that, everybody who's present, do you want to introduce yourself, say how we should refer to you, or shill anything? Anything?
Okay, so I will start. I am Jerris from Geneva, Switzerland. I am a 35-year-old male, European, as you can see from my avatar. And I am there to participate to the discussion and listen to the reading you are about to do.
Baller. And then we have Ashley, who is a regular guest, probably the next most regular guest. Maybe you and Glebs are tied for how often you're on here.
Yes, hello.
Okay, and then we have Gay Space Luxury Communism. What is the best name to refer to you by? Because you change your name literally every day. And it's
He
very
says he doesn't
confusing.
want to speak live.
Oh, you don't want to speak at all. Oh, okay. So you'll just be sitting and listening. All right, sounds good. So we'll just launch into it. It's Beauty and the Beast, a parable for our time. And then what I did on the last stream is I have decided to read through a whole page, and then that way it makes it very easy to just timestamp each page. And then no matter how long we end up rambling, anybody who just kind of wants to skip through and get just the pages read to them, then they have that option. So I wish I had thought of that from the get-go, but this was a bit of a learning experience. Hello to Port Film Co-op. Nice to see you there. And hey, if you want to join my Discord, you're welcome to. And you can hop in as well if you'd like to, or if you want to hang out in the cozy little live chat, that's more convenient. That also works. But good to see ya. All right, so it's Beauty and the Beast, a parable for our time, written by Elizabeth Dodson Gray. Robert Bly and the Men's Movement, in its mythopoetic form, is totally focused on myth and story as meaning, so it seems appropriate to focus upon a story as a lens through which to examine the men's movement. Beauty and the Beast is an old fairy tale that has recently been powerfully recast in movie form. That's funny because it was actually recently recast in movie form, like in the current year. I mean, it was like a few years ago, but this is technically still true, which is very funny. It's just a mythopoetic tale. Beauty in the movie is a daringly different girl. She is full of life and energy and in love with reading. She has a mind. She dreams of a wider world not seen by the villagers and yet disparaged by them. In the movie, Beauty magically has no mother but is totally devoted to her father. Beauty is also easily able to discern that the arrogant but handsome Gaston is a macho fluffhead. The village where Beauty and her father live is fully populated with typical patriarchal values, and the center of attention in the movies is the Beast. The Beast, living in isolation in his castle, is really a male under a spell. He is not himself, but is ugly on the surface, and he has a terrible temper. Does the Beast's psychological profile in the film remind you of a violent, prone wife batterer? So we're off to a great start here. I don't know, do you guys think of a wife batterer? So she's obviously referring to the Disney movie. I think that must have been really new around this time. Personally, I don't think of a wife batterer in particular when I think of the Beast. It seems a little bit more generic than that. And I will say, though, there's something about, the fact that she's cared for and protected and, allowed to live this lifestyle where she just reads books all the time. You know, at the time when that movie, has its setting, that would have been considered, kind of a luxury to be able to not do, backbreaking labor, but to kind of sit around reading books all day. Yeah, that does express patriarchal values. It absolutely does.
Like, I think only pretty much the upper middle class and the aristocracy would have time to do shit like that. So.
Yeah, and I do want to say Beauty and the Beast is probably my favorite of the animated Disney classics. Whenever I have students who are like little girls who are really into Disney princesses, I like to ask them who their favorite is. Because then if they ask me, I get to tell them my favorite is Belle. Because Belle is the smart Disney princess. She's the one that reads books. And she's also self-sacrificing and very heroic. I think the only other truly heroic Disney princess would be Mulan. Those are the only two who kind of like go on journeys where they have to actually sacrifice things and prove themselves and overcome obstacles. The rest of them are just kind of graceful and kind and pretty, and that's about it. I suppose Princess Tiana's another one, kind of in that camp, but again, it's all patriarchy.
The archetype of the Disney princesses are really, really interesting, and that is something I took a lot of time to think about since I have a daughter that is now 12-year old. And yes, it is really interesting when you see that all those princesses don't have a mother, that the father figure is kind of weak and manipulated either by his new wife or someone on the background. And that is something that is really interesting because that is some sort of the view of the family that we feed our children with, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, like there's a lot of talk about the black guy in the horror movie. I think that the mother in the Disney movie is in even greater danger. Either you were dead from the beginning, or Disney's about to kill you. Hey, Nikos is in here.
Yes.
My longtime Facebook friend. I'm glad to see you made it. Just so you know that this one is live, so you are live on my very, very prestigious channel.
That's
Yes,
fine.
yes, I know.
Yep, so we just got through the first...
Calimera, everybody.
Yeah,
Hi,
so
Nikos.
Nikos is a very outspoken and activist.
Calimera. Nobody comes on my live chat, so I had to come over here. I tell people to get the fuck on my voice chat, and everybody just come. I've seen people. I'm like, oh my god. I might as well go where the action is.
Hell yeah.
Yes,
I'm
I
glad
saw
my
that
place
you
is
put
hopping.
something on your server.
Oh, shut
But
up. Yeah, but you never came. I don't give a fuck.
Yes, I know, but I had already answered to Spacepan, so...
Oh,
You know?
okay. You know what? I don't want to hear it.
Well, so
I'm just-
Nikos, just in case you're not in the know,
Yes,
this
yes,
series
yes.
I do is we're reading from a book I found at the Twin Cities Men's Center called Women Respond to the Men's Movement, and it was published in 1992.
Okay.
So it's very interesting. It didn't age well, and it's a little bit funny. There's a lot of communism, a lot of ecofeminism, a lot of things that are very familiar, but also some things
Right.
that are I don't know, a little bit antiquated. So it's kind of an interesting blend, an interesting snapshot of history.
Dreadful.
It's dreadful. It's the worst
Oh,
thing
I
ever.
bet.
So I'm going to be
They're
sitting
pretty-
here
probably
for probably a
pretty
few
horrific.
hours reading through this garbage until the book's done, because I only have 2 essays left. So this
Okay.
feminist is going to explain to us how Beauty and the Beast is patriarchy and is awful.
Cool.
So she continues. And the storyline? Beauty sacrifices herself to save her father's life, and then feels called upon to sacrifice herself again, this time to save or redeem the Beast. The spell that is upon the Beast is broken by the love of a good woman, and Beauty frees him finally to become his concealed wondrous self. The movie retells the story behind the t-shirt caption, "To find Prince Charming, you have to kiss a lot of toads." All this is a typical patriarchal tale about what is required of a good woman. She is to sacrifice herself for a man. What is exceptional about Beauty and the Beast is the additional condition of the Beast's release, that he is to genuinely love another. Common themes in the movie and the men's movement. what reminded me of the men's movement was that while beauty gets cobiling, what is this word? Cobilling? Cobiling? Cobilling? Co-billing. Oh, they're both billed in the title. I've never seen that word in my life. Sorry. While beauty gets co-billing in the story title and movie, the whole focus is really upon the beast. The central question is, will the beast be delivered from his enchantment? Will he be returned to his true identity? This focus on the beast, the male, is shared by the Robert Bly contingent of the men's movement. The central question for them is the redemption of the male from his enchantment by a journey that is the man's perennial quest for his true identity. In the movie and in the men's movement, the old macho hero is dead. Robert Bly and Sam Keane and others are clear that the true male self is not the Gaston of the movie. Gaston in the movie is clearly the outdated male stereotype. Handsome, arrogant, athletic, conceited, macho, and attracted to beauty only by her physical appearance. The old macho hero may be dead, but the beast is still with us. In Beauty and the Beast, there is the clear mythopoetic representation of the man who is totally preoccupied with his own salvation, who is prone to violence, and who is still very much under the spell of an enchantment. While he was living his life and occupying his own niche or slot within the patriarchal system, he was overcome, captured, transformed in his being, enchanted. What is unsaid and unseen is that it is indeed the patriarchal system of relationships that has done this to him and that has transformed his life, making him into the beast. So before I continue further into this section, any thoughts? Anything spring out at you from this last page here that anyone was dying to comment on? I guess the thing that I think is funny is she acknowledges that Gaston is an archetype that's kind of to be mocked and ridiculed, and she's seeing this parallel within Robert Bly's men's movement, right? Yet when she's criticizing the beast, she kind of sees it as making excuses for everything that's bad about masculinity, when at the same time she has to explain away the fact that the movie's presenting a version of masculinity that's kind of caricaturized and criticized. So to me, it seems very well-rounded, right? And I think that to her, it's like if there's any aspect of male victimhood or any aspect of focusing on men or their issues as ends in themselves, then that's too much. Even if we also have like a strong male character that's villainized in the movie and set up for criticism. I guess to me that's kind of my major criticism of where she's going with this. But in all fairness, I did kind of cut her off halfway through this section. So, all right, I'll go ahead and continue with the next part. We glimpse this man also in the men caught up in the Robert Bly portion of the men's movement, men who are the audience for his best-selling book Iron John. They are men desperately searching for the salvation of their male souls. Their quest is for the holy grail of a primal masculinity. But sadly, what these men, and Bly, do not yet perceive is that the true cause of their enchantment. They do not yet grasp what it is that holds them captive, namely, the patriarchal system itself. According to the mythopoetic men's movement, each man seeks, and Robert Bly offers, an individual journey of salvation. What they do not yet understand is that this is impossible unless they break the spell that holds them captive, and that this spell is not individual and personal, but instead organizational and cultural, comprising the entire system of male power and privilege and violence that feminists have named patriarchy. Bly himself does not understand this. While he says he eschews the macho male of the past, Bly's foundational myth of Iron John is taken from the Brothers Grimm's collection of fairy tales, which arose out of our patriarchal past. So her argument is that Robert Bly has based his approach on something that itself was based in patriarchy, and therefore he's missing the real problem. And she thinks that instead of men having a personal, individualized journey towards overcoming, any bad or negative aspects of their personality, instead they should look towards the feminist cookie cut model where we just criticize patriarchy.
It's really interesting what you just say. In my opinion, what is really interesting is that the character is going to this personal struggle, but like you say, the only way to redeem himself, to get back to his truer identity, his real identity, is through a woman. In the end, there is absolutely no way to obtain anything if it's not for the woman herself.
Yeah,
Which
and that's
in
the
the end
common
make her
thread.
kind of the central character of the story.
Yeah, and she describes Beauty and the Beast as being all about the beast, but I don't know, that's really never been the way I've experienced that movie. Just because I've always really, really liked Belle as a character and found her to be someone who I like to follow, and like I don't like to see her suffer. Like to me, a lot of it really was focused on her. So the way she describes the movie as being all about the beast, to me that seems very, very strange. I imagine that merchandise featuring Belle tends to sell better than merchandise featuring the Beast.
Yeah, I don't think I have a suspicion that absolutely nobody reads it this way besides her. Like, yeah, Belle is clearly the protagonist.
And what I like about this essay, though, is it is kind of like a prehistoric Gamergate, right? Like, this would be, like, she could totally work for Kotaku, you know? With this kind of, like mindset. This is
Yes,
Kotaku version
she fits
0.
perfectly in that setting.
Yeah, but that's the thing is that, this idea that men should define themselves through women, that's the common line that you see from basically anything outside of MGTOW, and it's also the thing you see in the more kind of traditionalist strains of the men's rights movement. Whereas the parts of the men's rights
It's
movement that are kind of more in line with MGTOW, like I consider myself to be a MGTOW supporting MRA. And like that's why so much of my perspective is very anti-gynocentric and very much about rejecting this idea that you must use a woman to define your purpose.
yeah, it's is MGTOW fiction actually a thing? I wonder about that. I remember Alison Tiemann had was basically her answer to the Bechdel test. She had something that she called the fire test. It was based on the name of some TV show, rather amusingly named. And the idea
Halt and
was
catch
that
fire, right?
sorry,
Halt and catch fire.
yeah, that was it. And it was like, do any two male characters, have a conversation about something that isn't about protecting or providing for women? And that's actually pretty hard to find in fiction. A lot harder to find, probably, than the reverse.
Yeah, it's almost as though men and women actually tend to kind of like each other and tend to kind of prefer to get along when they can manage it.
Yeah.
But that's actually funny. I didn't realize she had made a rule about it because I know for a while, like that thing happens where you watch a TV series and then you just like don't want to shut up about it and just only want to talk about that, and you're just twisting all of your friends' arms into watching that show. And like for a while I was like, oh well, I'll wait and I'll see if I can watch this show, and then I'll go back and listen to the streams. And I watched like I think a couple episodes of it, but it didn't quite grab my attention. And I think it's the kind of show where you gotta like really kind of get invested, and then it kind of gets better and better. But now I've just been reminded of that, and I
Yeah.
kind of feel like I should circle back and check it out.
Mad Men was also kind of like that. I mean, I enjoyed it, but a lot of people can't get into it because they say the first few episodes were boring. But yeah, I thought it was really entertaining. Sorry.
Yeah, I
just a
watched like
side
2 or 3 episodes of that, and then I got bored of it. I wasn't even bored of it. I just wasn't quite hooked. I guess I just didn't watch it at the right time. All right, let's continue.
Yeah.
So it says honoring men's sacred spaces. While I perceive grievous flaws in Robert Bly's mythology and bemoan his lack of any feminist analysis of male power in the culture, I feel I must also honor what happens in a talking stick circle. As a woman and a feminist, I know I know it to be a sacred space when women gather to tell their own stories. I can light a candle to celebrate this as a sacred space. So when men gather in a circle, not to talk of football or how many notches they have on their shooter, but to talk instead of their own interior life so long concealed and coerced by a John Wayne model of manhood, then I think I must also honor as sacred these spaces being created by men. But...
John Wayne model of manhood.
Yeah, right. It's... She's got a way with words. I can't take that from her. Oh, and that was its own section. That was it. I thought for sure that was going to be a setup. Well, we'll see how well she honors this. Alright, the place of repentance in men's sacred work. What I want for men is that they be able to find again their interior lives, which for so long have been largely ignored by them. It is true that only men are going to be able to redefine masculinity and shape it into new personal and cultural formulations that are not woman-hating. Robert Bly does not do it. Sam Keen begins it. And as men do it, it is sacred work. Men's healing themselves must be done within a fundamental repentance for the essential male-centeredness of the past. Gus Kaufman is right in his critique of the Bly movement. Its defect is that it never challenges, never even sees the most fundamental problem of the construction of manhood, the assumption of male centrality. It therefore reproduces patriarchy. All of us, both male and female, have been socialized into Adam's world. There is a major conceptual trap that confuses being human with being male. Men must discover and accept that they are not the center and fullness of the human world, but rather are bipolar partners within this human species. They are but half the human race. Therefore, while men work out their own salvation with fear and trembling, it must not be done at the expense of women. They must see, understand, and change what they have done to their mothers, wives, sisters, and daughters. And even while they are grieving the wounds they carry as sons of absent and non-feeling or deriding fathers, they must face up to the present task of being very different fathers for their own sons and daughters. So this is very typical of these, where the idea that that the mother has any problem is erased, and of course single motherhood is solely the cause of fathers just being absent. Parental alienation is impossible in her worldview. Because this entire narrative, as she's constructing it, could you possibly see this having any useful application to, the son of a single mother who, for example, just never even told the father that she was pregnant and just had the child unilaterally by herself because it was like a one-night stand or whatever, and he had no idea. Or, the father who desperately really wants to be part of the child's life, but, can't because, she's made up allegations of abuse and now there's a restraining order, or because she got a no-fault divorce or whatever the case may be. Like these situations, just like you really only need one example like that to point to and say, well, what about them? And I feel like how she's constructed this problem, there's nothing. She's just gonna demand of him, more. And what is it that she feels Robert Bly's men's movement will take away from women? If we criticize the welfare state and that it's disproportionately giving resources to women who basically are having children so that they can just game the system. Well, why shouldn't those women have that taken away from them? They're abusing people's capacity for care and concern and for charity, and it's a rather awful and despicable thing. But of course, anything, even talking about taking women's rights away, like taking away their right to suffrage. Even that is an ill-gotten gain. If women want to have that right, then there needs to be serious discussion of what the reciprocal social responsibility is and what men's responsibility is, and that needs to be made equal. For the entire history of women having suffrage, they've had it on the grounds that they haven't had any responsibility at all, But yeah. Jarrus, did you have any
Yes,
thoughts on that? I
I
saw
agree
you
with you.
unmuted.
And it's a double-edged sword because in some sort of way it promote the role of the woman, but in another way it also reduces it to something very, very simple.
Yeah. Alright, so the next section is called Rewriting Patriarchal Scripts. Both Bly and Keene assume men can only find themselves by leaving their mother's household. This is the old patriarchal script of masculinity being named only in opposition to anything female. If women are soft, then men must be hard. If women are nurturing, then men must not nurture, and on and on. All this continues the old patriarchal sense that boys are somehow deeply contaminated by their mother's child rearing. What is missing here is a grasp of how it is patriarchy which forces women to do all that child rearing, even as patriarchy is coercing most men to avoid it. Let's see, I think that's kind of interesting to note. I do want to note actually earlier how she was mentioning that there's sort of like a basically a male version, like an androcentrism. Um, I think that that's a really popular talking point of feminists, right? Is that they say that, well, if you say man as the default, you're assuming a male experience. And the interesting, men's rights kind of counterpoint to this is that female is marked, right? And it's something that makes it special. And sometimes, being seen as the default, being seen as kind of non-special is actually a burden. It's actually a bad thing. But there is some truth to this idea that if we think of the default human, maybe the default is a man, right? Let's see. But yeah, so then she's arguing that patriarchy keeps men away from child rearing, and the real question is why did patriarchy force women into child rearing? I think the answer is that basically you look at things that need to get done, and then they delegated all of the easier tasks to women.
Well, I think the reason that men are often in this position of being kind of the default experience is because they are kind of the hyper-agentic sex as opposed to hypo-agentic, and they tend to be the real movers and shakers civilizationally. So it's like if androcentrism, you can say that it exists in a sense of, I guess, like affording a certain type of, let's say, social status to men that isn't afforded to women or isn't usually afforded to women. But I don't think, I don't think it automatically follows that that's, I guess, irrational. And yeah, I don't know what else to say about it.
Well, I think that makes a lot of sense because when you talk about humanity and talk about like humans doing things, right? It seems to me that that would make a lot of sense, right? Is that you're talking about people doing things, and therefore it's going to be a man, presumably.
Yep.
Whereas, like, if you try to make it somebody who's kind of more of someone who's acted upon, right? Then it's like, where do you go from there? There's like nothing to do with it. So I think that might be a big part of it.
And she was also pontificating about all these dualities in the behaviors of the sexes. But, like, part of the reason these differences exist to begin with, not the only reason, but a substantial part of it, is because women find particular characteristics in men attractive. Like, you've got to look at it this way. If being a violent criminal, let's say, was not attractive to a single woman, like literally wasn't attractive to a single woman on the planet, there would be no male violent criminals. Not because it's actually some kind of a conscious strategy on their part, but just because the genes that facilitate that behavior just wouldn't get passed on. So
yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense too.
kind of a waste of time to attribute blame in these kinds of things, because it is ultimately kind of a reciprocal thing. Although in a lot of ways, insofar as sexual selection is a force in humans, I think there is generally stronger selection on men, and that's actually why, for instance, the force of selection pressure tends to be in the direction of females selecting males. That's why, for instance, women are more likely to have masculine faces than men are to have feminine faces. It's because genetic spillover from males into females is more common than the reverse, because the reverse is selected out by women, if you see what I'm saying.
Yeah, yeah, that makes perfect sense.
Sorry for being even more low energy than normal, by the way. I'm kind of sleep deprived.
Well, it's earlier where you are than usual.
Yeah.
I'm just shilling the link around a little bit. Okay.
Yes, but it's also clearly that the market, if I can say so, of a relationship, at least in Europe, is mostly on the favor of the woman. So that allow them to. They don't need to have a good appearance as much as they might need to have in other cultures, if you see my point.
Yeah.
So a woman with masculine features will be more able to reproduce or find mate or have a rewarding sexual life, kind of, than in other countries, because the mentality is more free, and like I said, it's clearly the market is clearly biased on favor of the woman, at least in Europe.
Well, in the U.S. too. I imagine.
Yes,
Yeah.
probably that will make sense, because US is an occidental country also, and they are living almost by the same cultural standard as we are, at
Oh
least
yeah. Oh
mostly.
God. Yeah, it's horrible here.
Well, and one point that comes up a
That's
lot
why
is
you can
that
see very
women control such a
very
disproportionate
ugly
amount.
and older woman with younger guys here.
Oh yeah, that's okay. But it used to be okay, with the opposite too. But now it's like, oh, now they took over. It's like, oh, you can't have that anymore. It's so stupid.
Yes, it's ridiculous, because as a man you are able to procreate later in life. So
Yeah.
it would make more sense for you to have a younger companion later in your life than for a woman, because
Well,
I
there's
am
this whole
35.
it's this cult ideology that took over mindset, and it's like cult feminist horrific mindset that took over. It's like it's a dystopian horrific nightmare that we're dealing with here. I don't even understand. Like in the '80s, and the hell, it was common for like an older guy to be with a young. Now it's, oh my god, like from the feminist since they took over. Now it's like you can't have that.
Yes,
So
it used to be that for a guy in his
Yeah,
50 to have
because
a new family was more common than it is now.
oh yeah.
Clearly,
if you're 50 and you are in a relationship with a woman who's even like 30, that's basically pedophilia in most
Oh
people's
Jesus
estimation.
Christ.
I'm joking, but
I
that's
know, I know. Oh, I know. You're joking. It's just, but that's true. That's what they think. I mean, that's how they manipulated the narrative. I mean, it's so. I mean, it's kind of scary how they actually will get their way with the narrative, and they have control over the narrative. And I don't know what year this switched over to being to this acceptable, because of course back then you had that older guys with young. Now it's okay for, like he said, for the older women to be with the younger guys, but not the opposite. So I don't know. I don't know where this what year or what decade this made the switch.
I will, if I can point one element of popular culture that, at least in my opinion, helped a lot this narrative, is the TV show that was played a few years back, Sex and the City. That was, in my opinion, a show that that made the big push for the narrative in the mainstream culture. For that narrative, I'm sorry.
Possibly. I mean, TV is what mind controls the population and usually makes, you know, whatever's popular on TV, that's the way the dumbed down population goes, unfortunately. I mean, you could be right. I never watched the show in my life. I had some friends that did it.
My girlfriend at the time watched every and each episode, and since I was living with her, I was kind of exposed to it. But it's not the only one. But that is, in my opinion, one of the big element of the whole cougar culture. You know, the fact that an older lady can prey on younger male.
I honestly never seen the show myself, but I had friends, like I said, that watched it. I never had the desire to watch it, but that could be it, because the way, you know, they do try to sway the population with TV, because it is mind control. So who knows? I don't know, because I never watched it, but that could be true. I'm sure there's other shows too, though.
Oh yes, clearly it was part of a bigger movement. Yeah, that's one element that I isolate because I was exposed to it, but there was many different elements of that were playing a part in, like I say, establishing this glorification
you watched
of the.
So you must know.
Well, you're from France, so of course you were exposed to it. You were like at ground zero of of sex positive like entertainment media, right? We had all these like French new wave films, like what's it called? The one about like the brother and the sister who go into a 3-way relationship with the American, The Dreamers. That one.
Exactly.
It's a fantastic movie.
All those kind of.
But I feel like that's how it started. It started off with these movies that were like very avant-garde, and like the thing was these were the first movies to be very explicitly sexualized, and you had people in this kind of more sex-positive culture going out there and like experiencing these things, and then they see this movie and it's kind of like the only medium that's speaking to that, right? So it kind of gains this reverent status as like a truth teller. And then you have more of like the pop things later on, like the whole Sex and the City and the sleazy romance novels and things like that driving it. And then eventually you had things that were like in like the high school drama genre. If you watch like very early renditions of it, it's much more wholesome, right? It's much more it's just wholesome, right? But then, you know, you have like the more modern things like Degrassi, right, or Dawson's Creek, where it's much more explicitly kind of sexualized. And I do think that was kind of, you know, kind of reveals like the insidious kind of motion to this whole idea that people use the media to push these things.
Yeah, you've got to get out there, and they'll use this retarded phrase like exploration. They'll say, "Oh, you've got to explore yourself and explore your sexuality," like whatever the fuck that means. Usually directed at women. Like, you know, it's interesting how for all of human history we managed to get by just fucking fine without that. Like, I'm not saying it's bad, but it's just difficult to ignore that, you know.
Well, it is funny too how explore yourself means go and explore a whole bunch of other people, right? Like explore yourself, shouldn't that mean like get into some really fancy masturbation, right? Shouldn't that mean like different kinds of dildos, different kinds of sex toys, different kinds of pocket pussies? Like shouldn't it just be all in sex toys? Like why does explore yourself mean like screwing a whole bunch of other people? Because at least you know,
it's a very selfish way to see the relation between people, the sexual relation it is, because yes, it's like saying go masturbate using other people's body. That's how I see it when you say go explore yourself. in that sense, you know?
Yeah, it kind of reduces people down to just different pocket pussies and dildos.
Yes.
So yeah.
Yes,
But I did just want to
essentially it's like
mention
a
the last
Pokemon
thing she
thing.
had mentioned
You
here
gotta
is
catch them all, you know.
okay. So I just wanted to mention this idea that does patriarchy force women into these roles? I think the Scandinavian paradox kind of blows that out of the water. I don't think that she'd have an answer to that. You know, had this been written more recently. So anyway, let's see what happens. She says Bly also never examines patriarchy's role in scripting men to overwork. So I wasn't expecting that. Sorry. This pattern of overworking causes men to neglect their children and to wound their daughters as well as their sons. Nor is Bly clear about the role of patriarchy as a systemic repressive phenomenon, causing boys and men to bury their feelings and become remote father figures who cannot express love. Bly apparently does not see how, generation after generation, patriarchy has coerced us all so that men are reared by women, ignored by fathers, and then want to flee women in order to discover their true masculinity. These social roles that patriarchy designs, coerces, and perpetuates cause the very inner wounds Bly describes so eloquently and seeks to heal. Bly tries nobly to lance men's inner wounds, but he does not perceive their root cause in the power system of patriarchy, so he is helpless to interpret this process as the generations roll on. So there you have it. You know, she thinks that men overwork and are emotionally distant, right? Because they were scripted that way by the patriarchy.
Sorry, I missed that last part. Like, they were scripted in what way?
They were scripted to overwork, right? So it wasn't the fact that they have to make ends meet. It's not the fact that he loves his wife and children and wants to see them have nice things and have financial security and be able to eat things and to be able to afford little Timmy's birthday present, right? No. It's because he wants power and dominion over them, and he was scripted into doing that, and that's why he's actually overworking. And also, because he decided to overwork, fuck him. Fuck him for not showing enough love to his wife and his daughters. Oh, and also his sons. That was another interesting bit. To wound their daughters as well as their sons, right? Like she can't even hide the fact that she's just using female victimhood as the central focus, and then like the sons are just this kind of afterthought thrown in there. Like it's very, very naked how she's written this. Sorry, my foot got caught on a hanger. Anyway, I just thought that was like astounding. Okay, women's part in breaking the enchantment of patriarchy. Oh, sorry, do you have a thought on this section here?
Yes, but what is interesting is that mostly in life, when you encounter something that you don't like or that you would like to change, you tweak it in some sort of way. You play with the setting or whatever. You just don't go and say, okay, so it's not good. I will totally reverse it, and that will be better. You know, that is never the way to go in life. To say something is bad, we must reverse it totally. You always make adjustment, tweak it, and yes, try different setting. But you never ever. I mean, if your sock is not right on your foot, you will not put it in the other sense. You know.
That's actually an interesting point, right? Like, how many feminists have said, you know what, we don't, like, let's just tweak patriarchy. I mean, that is kind of the modern traditionalist woman stance, right? Right, but a lot of them, I think, they would reject the notion that their view of traditionalism is patriarchal, right? So it is very funny that they've said, okay, here is all of humanity, all of our culture, all of our art, all of our analysis, all of our everything was based on patriarchy, and we need to smash it all. Just fuck it. Just and not only do we need to destroy it instead of just tweaking it, we need to do the opposite. Right?
Yes, exactly. The total opposite.
And do you know what'll happen then? Women will rebuild it, and it'll be 1,000 times better, just like they did on that TV show Survivors.
That's right. That was a phenomenal. I wish we could find the entire version of that episode because it.
Truly, truly the pinnacle of civilization. I think you'll agree.
I mean, I guess I can't really judge because I feel like if I were on survival, I'd probably be roughly as useful as like the most average lesbian among the women. You know, like I don't.
That's not really the point, though. It's like just
Right.
making an aggregate point about the differences between men and women.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah, like I remember they had the
Yes, in
map and they
the
were
end,
trying
just
to get
the-
around and they were like crying because they kept fucking it up and ended up where they started. And it felt bad, you know. Didn't feel good.
Yes, and also bringing everything back to patriarchy is a stupid mistake. It will also totally discount the historical role of women in society and in building the world that we are in. It's like saying, okay, so women are done nothing and nothing is really important, so let's switch everything over so we can build a new society on a woman principle. But I think that the society that we are living in is much impregnated with woman principle.
Yeah, and like I'm all for egalitarianism. The only thing is that true egalitarianism is probably naturally going to result in something that very closely resembles traditionalism in most cases. And I think the hint of it is, you know, this take I have, it's a little bit spicy, but um you know, she's saying women are forced into all these roles by patriarchy. No, they want to do them. And I do believe that the reason most of these roles were delegated to women, it's not because men aren't capable of doing them. It's because women are not capable of doing the other things, right? It's that you're looking at all the stuff that needs to get done, and basically there's stuff that there's one thing only women can do, which is have babies, which is soon to be automated out anyway. And then there's a whole class of stuff that can be done by both genders, and then there's a whole class of things that can really generally only be done by men. So naturally, men do those things which only they're capable of doing, and then women are kind of left to have the babies and then to finish up whatever other gender neutral things that are left to be done. And that's why women's labor tends to be worth less than a man's labor.
Yeah.
Like I feel like it's a
completely
controversial
agree.
thing to say, but it's really goddamn obvious.
Yeah, and the automation of the female gender role is well, it's more obvious, I think, in 2019 than the automation of male roles, just because of job automation and stuff. That's going to be a much more slow burn process, whereas the automation of the female role, because the female role is quite narrow in that sense, like it's basically done. It's why I don't think men should be duty bound to support housewives. I mean, a lot of them will still do it anyway, but I don't think it should be incumbent upon men to do it just because they're men and women are women. Because it really, being a housewife in 2019 is just not the responsibility that it was, say, 200 years ago, unless you're
No,
homeschooling
clearly not.
and doing a bunch of other stuff, which most women don't.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes,
And I
but
call it the
nowadays, at
Roomba
least,
question. The
At least
Roomba
in Switzerland, it's
question.
impossible to
Okay, go ahead.
support an household on only one salary, and that is done by design also.
Sorry, Derek, were you saying something?
Well, I was just saying it's the Roomba question. You know, the Roombas are taking our jobs. And, like, there's a reason that Andrew Yang has built his whole presidential campaign on basically being a Luddite and fear mongering over self driving trucks. But the reason he at least can kind of build that case Whereas you couldn't build that case based on, oh, the Roombas are taking all the women's jobs. It's because, like, we realize that life just gets better and things just kind of go on, generally speaking. And of course, women aren't really, they're not held to that standard because I think so many of them can just rely on pretending that their role as a housewife is just as difficult now as it used to be. And I also think that's why traditionalism is becoming so popular among women, is because it's an extremely attractive role, right? This is the post vacuum cleaner, post Xanax world. So of course that's what you want to do, is be a housewife. Actually,
Yeah,
Ali Wong.
I was reading this paper by some guy posted it on Twitter a couple of days ago. Was something like, 2/3 of women who've had kids don't want to return to the workforce. It's like, well,
Yeah.
you know.
Well, and that's the thing too, is I know I had some friends on Facebook who are like gay men, and the guy's like, yeah, I'm a stay-at-home dad, and like all these women saying it's the hardest job ever are either they're dumb or they're a bunch of pussies, because this
Lying.
job is awesome.
I would suggest that they're lying, most of them.
Yeah, like my job's hanging out with babies all day, and like it's awesome. It's like super fun. I don't understand why it would be so stressful.
Yeah, like, and the other thing about that is, just to get full galaxy brain here. So, one of the critiques that people have of especially the early schooling system is that it's effectively just it serves almost as a kind of sorry, sleep deprivation,
Like a daycare.
babysitting essentially for middle class women, or actually just any women, pretty much in countries that have state education. And even if you did away with state education, you could still the parents could still have tons of free time if voluntary child work was allowed to come back, like you were suggesting in one of your videos, because it would be a more useful alternative to school. It would also free up the time of the parents to do their own thing. So, and that would be that's just another alternative future where the female role is essentially obsoleted by technology and by well, I guess what you would call capitalism.
Yeah, why can't we have baby Walmart greeters? Like, they'd be the best at it because they're so adorable. Everyone goes, "Oh, you're so cute," and then they're like, "Will you please come in for a sale?" And you're like, "Ah, okay, fine, I'll check it out. I got 10 minutes." It's just like people. They'll be out by the subway station shilling, and like they'll sell stickers to get money for a charity, and it's like, if an adult's shilling at you, just be like so rude to them, like, "Oh, screw you." It's like, I'm gonna shoulder check you on my way past you. But if it's like a little 4-year-old, right? They build up the courage to kind of approach you, right? You're just like, you feel like so bad if you're like rejecting them. You're just like, okay, fine, like here's the $1.
Oh, and also,
I'll take this
there was
sticker.
something I was gonna say to Fleegan first, like a few days ago when we were in the not live, but just talking in VC. It's something that I've been thinking about quite a bit lately. A lot of people make this point about how exalted female characters in popular media, like superhero movies, people will say that it's essentially a male character, but just with a female body. They're embodying a masculine sort of archetype. And I think that's a sign, actually, of the female role losing steam and then losing utility. Because let's be honest, what would a feminine superhero actually look like? And let's be fucking honest, would it really inspire awe or admiration in people in the same way that the superheroes that people are used to seeing are? Like, do you know what I mean? I kind of doubt it.
Well, here's the thing, though. Like, you
Okay, guys,
could. You can invent this, but then people will say, "Oh, well, she's too stereotypically feminine. Why didn't she do more masculine things?" And then Jared,
Well, the trouble is that female power, to a great extent, consists in proxy power. Like it's a power of getting other people to do things for you. I'm not saying you can't use it for good, but people talk about proxy violence and proxy agency and this kind of thing, which just doesn't really seem to inspire the same depth of feeling or respect as the straightforward form of power that's conventionally associated with males, where you're just acting as an agent in and of yourself against the world to procure resources from it or to defeat it or whatever. Does that make sense?
Yes, yes. Guys, I have to leave you now because I have some things to do, but I was very happy to participate, and thank you very much for having me on. It was a very pleasure.
Yeah, I'm glad you were able to stop by, and I think this is how I'm going to be doing my streams for a while, because I think it works out pretty well. I like to get other people's views on it. I like to give people a chance to step on if they want to. So, yeah, I'll be doing this in the future, and we'll be reading other stuff that might be, I guess, like, this book kind of sucks, because feminists are the worst, but the next thing I'm going to read, I think, is On Refusing to Be a Man by John Stoltenberg, who is a gay man that was married to Andrea Dworkin, and he's going to tell us what masculinity is all about. So I'm just dying to know, right? So anyway, if I'll keep you in the know. I'll let you know when we're doing some of that. But yeah, it's good to have you on.
Thank you very much, and have a nice day, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Keep it easy.
So, Derek, did you have something to add to what I just said there? I was kind of hoping.
Oh,
you
the
would,
other
but...
thing. Well, I invented a superhero who is the perfect female superhero, and her name is Girl Doll.
Yes.
She's a sex doll that is fashioned into a sex robot and ends up saving the day. But she's not really able to move on her own, so the entire plot just kind of happens around her. So she's literally an object, but she is the main character of this theoretical comic book that I want to exist.
Lol.
Yeah, because that should exist. We need to raise acceptance of the love dolls, because love dolls are our saviors. They are going to save humanity. And yeah, there needs to be a Girl Doll, the love doll superhero, and she's going to be the ideal, perfect feminist superhero.
I can't tell if you're being facetious or semi-facetious, but realistically, I don't think love dolls are actually going to be competitive with people until they're Terminator-like, basically, if that happens.
No, I think they will be, and I think it's not going to be love bots, it will be love dolls. Yeah, it will be. Okay. It will be. Mephistopheles in the chat agrees with me, and that is all the endorsement I need. I will keep on keeping on. No, I had an idea for a basic plot, and I'm not sure how much I like it. And I think that I might try to get more into fiction writing, because I think that I have a lot of really great ideas, but then I never pull through with them. Which I know that's everyone, right? Everybody kind of says that, but. I don't know. I'm gonna roll some dice. We'll see what happens.
With me, the problem is always research. Like, I have to write things that are kind of fantastical, because if I try to write something that's in any way connected to the real world, then I would have to do research. And if I wanted it to be really realistic, I would have to do 10 years of research, as people do. Professional authors actually do shit like that. And who the fuck has time for that shit? Certainly not someone as lazy as I am.
Yeah, no, I get what you mean. And that's actually one of the major hurdles I'm running into in the novella I'm planning. Because with all the things that I kind of want, it's really... There's just a lot of things that I could screw up. And if any one of them go too far wrong, anybody can just use that as a reason to dismiss the whole thing. So
I think you said at some point that you wanted to write detective fiction. Yeah, that's an example of something where I really would have no idea where to start. I'd be pretty fucked if I tried to do that.
No, and that's yeah, and it's not just that. It'll have a detective plot, like a subplot that's detective themed, but also in a future. And yeah, and it also involves courts and law. So I'll have to look into different ways of how the law is, but then I have to also kind of extrapolate that into what I think would happen in the future, and then also have like kind of a crime drama underneath it. But it's not really about any of those things. Those things just have to kind of be present enough. But anyway, I've resolved I'm gonna do less talking about it and more trying to write more of it. I have like a page of it that I wrote, and I want it to be like about as long as Ayn Rand's Anthem, like less than 100 pages. It's kind of like a nice bite-sized little thing. So
When you said Ayn Rand, like I thought you were gonna say The Fountainhead or Atlas Shrugged, and I was like, whoa, really? You've got lots of writing to do.
no, because I love Anthem. Like a lot of people point to those ones. Anthem is so great because it gets the major point across and just expresses her conception of man and the beauty of man in something that's so short. And all of her frustrations towards society come through in just that quick little novella. That's the secret cheat code of Ayn Rand. You don't need to read Atlas Shrugged, just read Anthem. It's the same shit.
Yeah.
But I mean, if you want more, like obviously read Atlas Shrugged. But anyway, we've tangented long enough. Let's plow through some more of this crap. All right. So she just explained how the real problem is patriarchy, and Bly failed because he hasn't addressed patriarchy. So we'll see what happens. Oh, I'm sorry. So we did finish this part. So now we're going to get to women's part in breaking the enchantment of patriarchy. So here's her solution. Her solution is women are going to do it. There is a further aspect of Beauty and the Beast that delights me. In the story, the release of the beast from his enchantment can only be accomplished by beauty, by the love of a good woman. I find that I can read this role for women in either of two ways. If I think of Beauty sacrificing herself for the beast, as she did for her father, it seems like a nasty replay of patriarchal scripts exploiting women into endless self-denial and self-sacrifice. See, I love this. So it's exploiting women into self-denial and self-sacrifice, right? Like the self part of that implies agency on the part of the women, but the entire thing is packaged within exploitation. It seems a little bit paradoxical to me. Anyway.
The thing about, I don't know if I'm reading too much into this, the thing about self-sacrifice reminds me of something that I said at some point about, when people talk about the princess syndrome, like there's a reason it's called that instead of the prince syndrome. I think it's basically just easier for a woman to become a spoiled brat narcissist than it is for a man. Not really for any intrinsic moral reason, but it's more just like a man who uses people and is rude and exploits their generosity, etc., is eventually going to get his ass kicked. So he's going to learn the hard way in that respect about why you shouldn't behave like that. But with a woman, it's not going to happen, which is why when a high-status woman, so a woman who has every right, you would think, to be arrogant and narcissistic, spoiled, etc., when a woman doesn't display those traits, it's kind of seen as more special because it has to come from within. It can't be incentivized from outside. It has to be just of her own making. And I think maybe it's the same thing with the self-sacrifice deal. Like people, on the one hand, people want to protect women, but it's like people value self-sacrifice in women. Maybe there are situations where people actually value it more from women than men, just because it isn't generally expected of women, and there's no external pressure pushing them to do so. So it's like an internally generated, like sort of a courageous thing. I don't know if that makes any sense.
Yeah, well, because the goalpost is shifted, right? So it's like if you have a bump in the night and a woman goes to investigate it and her husband doesn't, it's sort of twofold. Like, she's seen as heroic, whereas had the man investigated, he's just kind of doing what he's meant to do. And if he fails to do it, he's seen as a coward, whereas her failure to act on it is just kind of normal and understandable.
Right, yeah.
So I think that kind of shines through. And then you do have, I remember it was the honey badgers, I think it was Karen, contrasting this example of like a man in his 20s living with his parents and basically being a NEET, like he's seen as a loser. But if it's a girl in the same circumstance, she's kind of like a sheltered princess, and like she doesn't have that same amount of like pressure put on her.
Yeah, yeah. And they always specifically say, if it's a man who's in that position, like, people always specifically say you live with your mother, never with your parents or your father, like, always your mother. It's kind of interesting. Like, it actually is, funnily enough, it's true in my particular case, but that's because my dad's dead, so I have, like, a special reason for it in that case. But people who have, living parents and living parents who are still together, like, people will say this to them, that, oh, you live in your mother, specifically your mother's basement. It's really some weird, like, Freudian shit or something. I don't know.
Well, I wonder if it's that, or if maybe it's sort of like a statistical thing, in that, like, we have this prevalence of single motherhood such that, like, you can practically guarantee there's a mother involved, whereas the father has some chance of not being involved, or that, in the case where you have, like, a quote-unquote failure to launch, like, chances are also a little bit more likely that the father wasn't involved
Am I
somehow.
the only one, by the way, am I the only one who finds that phrase kind of cringy? I don't particularly know why, but yeah, failure to launch. I don't know.
What, the live in your mother's basement or parents' basement?
The phrase failure to launch.
Oh, I thought you meant.
I don't know.
Well, I mean, we all know.
Yeah, I mean, that is cringy.
Kinda. I mean, cool, because the moon landing was fake. So.
Of course.
Of course.
Well, the funny thing, sorry to take this on a complete tangent, but the moon landing, I think it was real, but I think it was motivated.
You do? Oh, come on. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry for you. I'm just joking. But, I mean, I'm sorry.
Okay.
It was just funny, but...
Let's say if it was real, I think, and it's funny because status
really
is part of men's, like, nature. It's like, I think it was
God.
motivated. I think it was motivated primarily by status posturing against Russia. Like, there was no real desire for exploration or any of that shit. It was just dick waving with the Russians.
Yeah, there was definitely. It was definitely. The whole thing was so fucking fake. I mean, you can see, I mean, and then they're trying to label people who see it as fake as, that's the whole gaslighting issue of it, as, crazy or because the whole but you all you have to do is look at it and see the history of how government lies to their own people, and it's fake. It's the most fakest fucking.
When America becomes Mad Max land, it would be interesting to see if we can get. When America becomes like Mad Max, like a dystopia, it'll be interesting to see if we can get access to Area 51.
Oh yeah, no, yeah,
we can get access to Area 51 and see if the film set for the moon landings is there.
I mean, it's all fake. It can be. I mean, if America does become like that, it still won't even be. I mean, they have it set up so Americans are so. They want people to. Americans love to worship the government and worship, and they have it the narrative set up so that anybody who opposes the mainstream narrative, they want to make people look like stupid or crazy or conspiracy theorists. I mean, that's the way it is, but I mean, we are being lied to beyond that. First of all, it's not only the moon landing; we're being lied to on an extreme level beyond that. That's a whole nother topic I won't get into because we don't. I mean, I'll be here forever.
We
Well,
could have a conspiracy
on the
stream.
subject
Like
of,
I'm, I am on board with a lot of that. And honestly, if I get nuked for, there's all kinds of crap on my channel that if anybody actually cares enough that they do a proper review, like the moment my channel hits 1,000 subscribers, I'm gone. Like, and I'm kind of accepted that. But if they happen to do like a manual review before then, yeah, they can probably find 3 strikes worth of crap on here. So I'd be happy to do a conspiracy stream and just talk about all the conspiracies that I think maybe have some merit.
Yeah, or I could just give like a brief rundown of my liberal argument for the morality of indentured servitude.
No, and I've probably I kind of made that case on accident and certain but yeah, like it's yeah, I don't disagree. I think that you're pretty reasonable on that. So oh, but I wanted to
So
mention
since,
okay, so if it's a big
Sorry.
dick waving contest, right? Why doesn't America, instead of like faking a moon landing, why don't they just say, "Oh yeah, Russia, you think communism's so great? Guess what we got? Bread. Suck my dick," right? Like,
Yeah, well, there is that as well. By the way, I can't remember if it's this month or next month. So either this month or next month, there is some portion of the human race that is going to be eliminated by the forces of natural selection, like the people who actually show up to that Area 51 raid. Like, you fucking know there will be some who actually try to do it.
that's next
How many
month. I believe
people
it's
do you
in
think-
September.
Yeah. How many people-ish do you think will actually attempt it?
I think a few thousand. I think a few thousand will actually attempt it.
Oh my god, it'll be such a shit show. I hope they live stream the whole thing.
It's going to be
Like-
lots of Naruto runners, and they're going to ignore the signs about how the military is going to shoot them, and it'll be a bloodbath. So,
Yeah.
So, a
A
culling.
very amusing one, though.
a
I have to
culling.
admit.
Yeah, well, you know. As dumb as they are, I feel like they're not the worst. I feel like if I could choose to cull some segment of the population of America, they would not be my choice. That would not be how I would choose to do it. And I suppose I can't say anything more specific than that because, well, it'd be in very poor taste.
Well, you don't have to use the word kill. Use code words like, nah, I'm just joking.
Minecrafted. That's the word now.
Okay, so which segment of the population would you Minecraft?
Well, okay, no. So I wouldn't like straight up. I don't believe in really like straight up killing people. But my proposal, which is apparently extremely controversial, I don't think it's that controversial. So I don't think there should be a welfare state. Standard libertarian position. But if you're going to twist my arm and say, no, we're forced to have a welfare state, then my concession there is, okay, if we're going to have a welfare state, can we have 2 tiers where if you agree to get yourself sterilized, then you get more benefits?
Yeah.
I think that makes
I
perfect
agree.
sense. I think that's perfectly logical. Like, I think
Yeah,
that's humane. It's humane, it's logical, it's ethical. I mean, it's not ethical because it involves a welfare state, but given the circumstances of the problem, it's more ethical than the status quo. It's in every way
basically
superior.
like giving people sterilization operations in exchange for a lifetime supply of Gibbs. 'Cause I
Well,
thought
not
about that as well.
necessarily lifetime. Just like there's 2 tiers of welfare. Either you get the crap tier welfare, or you get like the semi decent welfare with the Section 8 housing and like enough money for like the one child that you managed to have before you decided to sterilize yourself.
Yep.
Yeah, and I get it. It's a bit of an extreme reaction to they get more money the more kids they have. Like, I get that this is an extreme reaction, but you know what else is extreme? Is the fact that if I say, you know what, no, I refuse to pay my taxes in order to pay for your hood rat children, right? If I say that, then guess what happens? Armed men with guns eventually come into my house when I refuse to pay my taxes, and they say, hey, you got to answer for this. And if I resist them, they might kill me, or if not, they're going to put me into a prison, right, for tax evasion or whatever. Like that's extreme. Like they have enough layers of it to try to make it appear soft, but ultimately it's at the barrel of a gun, and ultimately it is very extreme. And I resent the fact that they can just hide behind that. So, anyway.
If I must admit, I'm curious to hear your take on this. Just like, I guess, at a selfish, emotional level, if you could just set aside your libertarian ethics for a minute, if that's possible. I must admit that, just on, like I said, a selfish level, the idea of a UBI does have a certain appeal to me. Because, for instance, if I was given the amount of money Yang was proposing per month in Britain, that would be just so awesome for me personally, because that would give me complete freedom from the tyrannous yoke of normies. Like, I could literally just work 1 or 2 night shifts a week at a warehouse or some shit, and that would be it. That would be enough to sustain my entire existence, and then I could literally just do whatever I wanted.
So, okay, the first thing is there's a practical problem with implementing it, but I think that for the purposes of a thought experiment, it's better to just suspend that. But the practical issue is that you can't pay for this UBI unless you increase taxes. And if you don't increase taxation in some way, you're just going to have a greater like debt, right? So then you're just looking at this short-term advantage of it. That's not going to work indefinitely. Eventually what's going to happen is it's going to collapse the currency. Or you're going to increase enough taxes to pay for it, in which case you're going to hurt the spending power of your currency either way, right? So it's not going to work. It's a fever dream. And like the real solution is, instead of having the government break your legs and then thanking them for giving you a cane, how about they just don't break your legs in the first place?
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I think the proposal most people are going for with as far as taxing is to, like, tax, hyper wealthy people, and God knows who fits into that bracket, but, like, whatever. Hyper wealthy people at 75% or some shit.
Yeah, and they're gonna F off. That's what they're gonna do. They're gonna push out their, right? So it'll work for a month or whatever, and then they're gonna restructure. They'll seastead if they have to, like it's like they'll do what they need to do. And the point is like here's the thing is that people it's impossible to conceive of how expensive government is. You can try to like reverse engineer it all, and like I'm fairly optimistic on this. I think that if all governments would just blink out of existence tomorrow, the cost of goods would plummet and the cost of labor would plummet to such a degree that you would have optional poverty. You would have your whole resource-based economy, UBI, utopian goodness package given to you. Like, you'd be able to create your little communisms, right? And then all the capitalists living outside of them would say, oh, wow, look at those poor souls. Like, yeah, I'll give them a couple of my shekels to help them not die for a little bit. And then, the communists will, of course, accept it and, like, continue to live, and they'll have their whole thing. Like, you could have all of this. You could have your communes under capitalism. And, like, you'll have the best communes you'll ever have in the entire freaking world if you would just let capitalism exist for 5 seconds. It's, like, all it would take. If we could just switch to crypto and just end all regulations and end all minimum wage and end all taxation. Like, yeah, people would be like, oh, what about crime? It's like, what crime? What reason would you have to possibly go through that trouble of committing crime when it's so easy to get employed and when everything is so cheap that it's so easy to just get the money to pay for the things you want? And it's like, there's a hump that if we can just get over it, it's not a utopia because we're always going to want better and better things, but that's fine. It'll be utopian in the sense that, yeah, we're not going to have crime anymore. Not really. We're not really going to have murder anymore. There's a lot of medieval crap that we've been able to essentially erase, and like we can continue to erase those things. Guns and crypto. That's all you need. Guns and crypto. But yeah, like the reason I think this is like I live in Hong Kong, right? And like I got a letter in the mail to like report my taxes for a tax
Oh,
like
you live in
refund or
Hong
whatever.
Kong? I didn't even know that.
Yeah, and I'm pissed off because I'm sitting here
I
like
can't believe.
I'm
I
living
had
in
no
a
idea you lived in Hong Kong.
yeah, it's considered a safe haven, and I'm sitting here like we still pay taxes, and I still have to
For some reason
freaking
I thought you lived
calculate
in the
this
U.S.
shit.
I don't know why.
No, I used to live in the U.S. I lived in the U.S. I've only been in Hong Kong for 1 year. But yeah, but then I moved to Hong Kong.
I heard it was very small. Anything you lived in. I don't know if that's true, but I've seen these places. It's like a box. I'm like, okay, I can never live there.
Yeah, the cage homes. Well, I live in a room. I live in a room. It has my bed. I have a little kitchen area, but I have a nice little balcony outside too, and I can sit on my balcony. And on Christmas, I did a stream from my balcony, and then I have my own little bathroom. So like, it's perfect for me. It's perfect for one person. Two people, it might be a little tricky.
The pictures I've seen makes it look horrific.
Well, there's cage homes. There's cage homes where
that?
it's basically a hostel with like a bunk bed, and then each bunk of the bed will have like a cage around it that you can lock or unlock. Yeah, that's kind of the
maybe because I
extreme.
grew up in a huge house, and of course, it's you get used to what you're used to. So yeah, of course. But when the pictures I seen, I'm like, oh my god, how do people live like that?
Well, I hate cleaning. I hate cleaning. So I love having a small space because it's enough for me to manage,
God. See, I'm a claustrophobic. I don't like when I die, you could put me in a small space, a coffin, throw me to the ground. I don't care. But when I'm alive, no, I need a big space. If you've seen my room, it's humongous. It's probably bigger than most houses in Hong Kong. I don't know, but I don't know. I hate small spaces. Maybe I don't know if it's like I wouldn't say like a fair. I don't know what you call it, but I don't know. Like I see these pictures and I'm like, oh my god. I don't know if it's true. I thought maybe they exaggerated. Because everything you see on TV or I says everybody can't live like that.
Well, okay, about a year ago, I did a stream where I did like a reveal of this place I'm living in now, so people can see like how big the room is and everything. And I think I might do another one just so people can contrast like 1 year ago what it looked like, but it's basically the fucking same. But yeah, I don't know. I can stretch my legs out, and that's good enough for me.
Oh my god.
As long as I have the internet, the world is big enough. As long as you got the internet.
I get very. That's why I said I would never. If those pictures are true, oh my god, I would. I don't know. I need like a space bigger than just stretch my legs out. I don't know. I have a claustrophobia thing. I hate small spaces, and I think like the government's trying to do this purposely over here. I'm not lying. I think it's a purpose agenda. Call me a conspiracy theory to make people go in small spaces. Because back then people had nice spaces and everything. Now it's all about these like this agenda, like they call them economy homes, or basically they want to make people fucking just living miserable. And in my interpretation, of course, like you said, you just need a space to stretch your legs. But no, that's all you hear about now is these smart homes and smart cars and smart space. I don't know. To me, it's an agenda. I mean, why? And they can live in their billion-dollar big mansions while the slaves can live in their boxes. I just don't. it pisses me off when I hear about this shit. And people go along, oh, yes, this will save the economy. No, this is an agenda to make people just miserable and live in small spaces. Sorry. I mean, because the elite know what they're doing. But in my opinion.
I will say
But, I mean,
like the
some
tiny
people,
homes.
like you
I
said,
think tiny homes
I
are
mean,
super cute.
I'm not, dissing you for liking that. But not everybody, wants to live in like a box.
No,
that's what they're trying
totally.
to
Well,
push.
and especially
And
if you
that's
have
what they-
kids, you know?
That's what they're pushing here.
No, yeah, and if you have like
What's that?
kids, you want to have the space for the kids to run around and everything, right? Like that's a big part of it too.
Well, yeah, but it's like you hear all this. Oh, it's good for the environment. It's good for bullshit.
No, yeah. Like I
the
have a
elite-
friend. I have a friend. He's a doctor. I was talking about, oh, I'm doing keto, and he's like, oh, that's not good for your healthy. It's not good for your healthy, right? That's what the Chinese say. And he sends me a link to a diet.
China's another fucking nutcase.
He sends me a link to a diet that's based on sustainability. And I'm sitting here like, okay,
Yeah.
bitch.
By the way, I'm back, guys. Sorry for my abrupt disappearance. My brother.
We didn't even know you disappeared.
We were on a tangent.
Okay.
But I was just going to say,
I'm just
this
joking.
fucker, he sent me a diet based on environmental sustainability. And I'm like, listen, you doctor. I'm going to tell you that me,
Wait,
as
who
an
did
idiot,
this?
I know better than you know that this diet is not optimized for human health. Because in the name of the diet,
Right.
it says it's optimized for preserving the environment. Right? You can't tell me that the diet optimized for the human environment is also the best diet optimized for human health. It can't be both things.
Right.
And he's like, no. And
mean,
I'm like,
this is
no,
insane.
you're wrong. I'm going to stick to keto, and that's
Yeah,
that. And
you
he's
have
like,
to see through the bullshit.
Anyway.
With respect to saving the environment, there's a great article. Hi, Fleegan. There's
Fleegan's here,
a great
great.
article by the philosopher Robert Wiblin, whom no one knows. The title of it never gets old to me. It's called what is it, like, why improve nature when destroying it is so much easier? And yeah, that's a great article that everyone should read.
Oh, any time I hear saving the environment, it's basically it translates what the elite wants you to do, and when the slave class, the dumb, you have to see through the bullshit. I mean, it's saving the environment is all an agenda by the elite, and I don't care what people think of me. I mean, it's true. I mean, what I've read, and I mean, of course, they're not saving the environment. They don't give a fuck. They live in their billion-dollar mansions. Give me a fucking break.
No, totally. And like
But
also the whole thing is
Yeah.
like preserving the environment just means to maintain stasis. Whereas like the word climate
exactly.
literally means change, right? Like things have changed throughout all of human history. So it's just like preserving this
And I hate my
maximum level
stupid
diversity.
Facebook friends that fucking repost this shit because I'm like, you dumb as fucking people.
Yeah, I
can't
don't
stand
disagree.
them. Oh, God. And of course you can't say anything because you have to be all nicey, but I'm like, then when they post this shit and they believe it like these, and I'm like, no, the elite wants you fucking dead. They don't care if you live in a box or they don't care what you live in. They want you dead, eventually, and that's what they want. But anyways, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well,
I go on
okay,
a rant
let's
when I
continue
talk
further
about
into
this,
this.
'cause
Let's try to
people are
close
so
out.
damn blind to the agenda. Go ahead.
Well, let's try to wrap up this stupid article here because I want to get to the second one before I get too tired, too tuckered. So this
what
was
time is it there in Hong Kong?
It's
By the
right now it's 11:35 p.m. I don't work tomorrow though.
Oh well. Okay.
Usually I
Well,
wake up
Calamita,
early. Yeah, usually I wake up early to start these streams. So I decided I was going to try to finish it tonight, and that way I can go shopping for little gifts and things.
I can never keep track of where. All I know is in Europe, it's 6 hours ahead of me, because I have friends in Europe that are in Switzerland. That's the only thing I fucking know, because I don't know anywhere else in. The Hong Kong I didn't know was so late. Oh my god! So basically, you're like 24, because it's 11:30, basically a.m. here. So you're 11:30 p.m. there. right?
Yeah, like I'm 12 hours off from a lot of people in America, roughly speaking. So I guess from you, I'm
Okay.
like, yeah,
I don't know.
like a day or so. But yeah.
Okay, yeah, because yeah, okay, sorry, go ahead.
All right. So this is the
Good.
last bit of that page. So now she's explained to us how women are going to break the enchantment of patriarchy. She says, in the Hindu tradition, there is a wonderful story about the savior role of a goddess named Durga. She is a young and beautiful woman at the height of her sexual powers. Durga comes riding into a world of chaos on the back of a tiger. She saves the day by slaying with her powerful sword the wild boar who is threatening everything with disaster. Durga is a female savior who is sexual, powerful, and virtuous all at once. Now that is a role for women that I think many of us can identify with. The Durga myth suggests it is only feminism that has the power to lift the spell of patriarchy. I don't know, that was just a bunch of fucking woo. Durga! But there's our goddess, right? There's a goddess movement theme in all of these essays. The three main veins of thought you'll see within this kind of feminism are communism, goddess movement, the divine feminine, and ecofeminism. Those are kind of the three veins. So I had bingo sheets made. We don't quite have a bingo yet. This one's a little different. Alright, next part. Patriarchy as a new Jericho. I often visualize patriarchy as a castle, much like the one in Beauty and the Beast, standing high on a forbidding hill, an entrenched system of male power and privilege protecting fragile men living inside its defended walls and wide moats. I also visualize the work of feminist women as being like that of Joshua, marching around those defended walls in the Hebrew scriptures, Joshua chapter 6, verses 1 to 21. We are blowing our trumpets of the feminist critique of male culture, marching and blowing, 7 times around, even 70 times around, until the walls of our Jericho come tumbling down. The enchantment of patriarchy requires a feminist analysis of culture to dissolve, something the pro-feminist wing of the men's movement understands all too well. The pro-feminist men understand that a men's movement that is centered only upon men and only pro-male, and only looks at the costs of masculinity, can never break its own enchantment. To free ourselves from patriarchy, we must all become pro-female and look at the cost to women of male power, male privilege, and male violence. It is also equally true that to free ourselves of racism, we can never just look at the cost to whites, but we must identify with the true cost to African Americans of white power, privilege, and violence. So I see feminism as leading the way in a cultural procession of conceptual ahas. Ahas. That's with a capital A. The breaking of evil enchantments, as in, the emperor has no clothes. I would invite into our procession around the walled city of patriarchy all those whose lives are emerging out of the cultural myths of the past and coming into new and liberating identities which are expressions of their own uniqueness. I invite to join us all women who are increasingly claiming their power to name themselves and are finding that in their renaming they change their world. Patriarchy has been a prison for women that none of us no longer need. I also open our ranks to all those women who suddenly... So let's get the next page up here. If you're watching on YouTube, I have the pages up here. Also in my Discord, in the section called the library, you can see the pages of this one. Alright, I would also open our ranks to all those women who suddenly understood while watching the Clarence Thomas hearings that sexual harassment, rape, date rape, pornography, battering, and violent death for women are part and parcel of patriarchal male power. I would welcome all those women who learned anew that within patriarchy a woman will not be believed. Feminism, recognition of the imbalance of power between men and women, combined with a commitment to correct that imbalance, is the only solvent that will dissolve patriarchy and release all of us, women and men, from its power. But I also want to open our ranks to all the children who care about their future of this endangered planet. Patriarchy is a root cause of ranking diversity. It is the conceptual basis for male domination over and exploitation of lesser genders, peoples, races, species, and of nature and the planet itself. Patriarchy is thus a conceptual cancer that is simply not compatible with the health of our interconnected Earth system. And finally, I open the ranks to our marchers to men. We can welcome all the men who can finally touch their feelings, name their wounds, and look in new places for the core of their positive male energy, as Sam Keen does in his book Fire in the Belly. Alright, so that brings us near the end of page 165 here. There's quite a lot to comment on in all those sections. Anything sticking out?
Yeah, we had, I couldn't help noticing we had the random digression about blacks, which seemed to come out of left field. That was...
Yeah, they gotta check that box, right? They gotta check that box and make sure. Because, like racism is kind of like feminism's little pet, right? They have a little black dog, a little black puppy. That's their pet, and they gotta make sure they stop and feed it, you know? And I do think it's sort of a passive-aggressive thing where they want racism to be kind of like their little pet issue, you know? But fundamentally, it's feminism doing it. So most fundamentally care about and center women, and that's also going to solve racism because reasons.
Something like that, yeah.
I love that she mentions the Clarence Thomas hearings because Anita Hill has been proven to be a liar. Like that particular, like I always say this book did not age well. This is like a classic example of that. Like 1,000%. Anita Hill was a liar. She claimed that like, oh, he put a pubic hair on my Coke. And anybody with a frontal lobe is sitting there like, you think a Supreme Court justice like pulled out a pubic hair and put it on your Coke? Like to harass you? Like, it's just insane. But of course, it's so, it's so sensational, right? It's so spicy, right? Well, why would she just make that up? You know, listen and believe. And I love how she makes this her hill to defend, you know, all these feminist claims regarding sexual harassment, rape, date rape, pornography, battering, and violent death for women. And
so they're all lies. The sexual assault claim was just based on that incident involving the pubic hair, or like...
Well, it was that combined with, she would argue, I think she argued there was like multiple instances, but that was like the smoking gun thing.
Yeah, it's amusing because it reminds me of this case we had in Britain where a man was charged with sexual assault or something because he went around, like, in the city centre of a major city in Britain, like, squirting soap at people from a soap dispenser because he found this sexually arousing, and that was charged as sexual assault because he said his motivation was sexual. It just seems like a really weird thing where, I don't know, it's like the motivation, whether or not something counts as a sexual assault is completely determined by the feelings in the heads of people who are on either side of the situation. So, like, if you enjoy going around poking people in the shoulder, like, it could literally be something as stupid as that in public, and then you tell the police that you did that because it sexually aroused you, and it wouldn't be that crazy considering some of the weird interests people have, then that becomes sexual assault. And then if someone puts a hair on your shoe and you feel somehow that hair was a pubic hair, and you know this somehow, and you feel that that's sexual assault, so then that's sexual assault, and it's just like completely beholden to whatever random shit goes on in the heads of either paranoid prospective victims or weirdo perpetrators, quote unquote, who just have strange interests that most people wouldn't even consider to be sexual. Like, it's, yeah, I don't know what the solution to it all is, but it seems very upside down and random.
That is funny. That is like a really logical sort of a response to really like outlandish allegations is you just kind of flip it and say, "Wait a minute, is this just your kink?" You know, that kind of is the case with Emma Solkowitz, right? Is she claimed she was like anally raped, and then of course when all the evidence comes out, she's sending her texts of like, like fuck me in the ass, right? Literally asking for it and still not asking for it. And then of course she also made her little rape movie, right? So like it's like, oh, so like being raped in the ass is like literally your fetish, and that's like literally exactly what you accused your victim of.
Yeah, and it seems as though the definition of what constitutes valid consent, in fact, seems to be constantly in flux, which is not a good place to be when you're talking about a serious crime or accusation. Seems very bad.
Well, especially not when there's no statute of limitations, when you can just claim stuff that happened 10, 20 years ago, All right, so we're almost at the end of this one here. So let's see. We'll just trudge on through and kill this one here. So the next section is called "Men Challenging Men to End Violence Against Women." So this will be a refreshing take, I'm sure. Very enlightened, I'm sure. I like Sam Keen's book very much because Keen says that male identity and virility in this historical time is found in a new vocation to save the planet. But it is distressing to me that neither Sam Keen's book nor Robert Bly's mention the epidemic of male violence against women. That omission seems to me like building a boat in a thunderstorm and never mentioning the thunderstorm. Or it is like focusing on the feelings of SS guards while the ovens of genocide burn a few feet away. It is like pondering the feelings of white people while black people are being lynched just over the hill. Okay.
Lol.
This is absolutely gotten ridiculous. So women are literally Jews
Hi,
and black
Glebs.
people.
Oh, hello there.
Glabs, I'm glad you've made it because this should be the finale, and it's not the same without you. So we've properly checked the boxes for this to happen.
By the way, let me rejoin again because I'm on Linux, and Discord on Linux has this weird issue sometimes that. Well, do you hear me correctly, by the way, or am I sounding weird?
Yes, normally.
I hear you.
Okay,
You're just a little low. Actually, both you and Ashley, you both sound a little low.
Well, because right now I can hear you with a very strong distortion, but it's one of those things that if I rejoin, it'll probably be fixed. One moment.
All right. So she continues. For men challenging men to end violence against women, we must look to the pro-feminist men within the men's movement. These are the men who have focused upon trying, as men, to stop the male violence against women. The White Ribbon Campaign in Canada was organized by such men. The campaign focuses around the second anniversary of the Montreal Massacre of Women when 25-year-old Marc Lepine denounced feminists as he shot 14 women dead in a rampage at the École Polytechnique. So yeah, there we go. That was like the one time when you had a legit what Elliot Rodger is supposed to be. It happened literally one time in all of human history, and that was Marc Lepine. That was the Montreal Massacre. And White Ribbon Campaign is the thing that actually Aaron Pitsey and Paul Elam, they like appropriated it and like took over the website, whiteribbon.com or whatever, and it caused like a huge stink. It was very, very funny. But anyway, the campaign was thought up by three men, Ron Slusser, Jack Layton, and another, but joined by other prominent Canadian men, including Senator Trevor Eaton, environmentalist David Suzuki, and actor Bruno Garussi. How much do you want to bet all these men are homosexual? Maybe not all. They were very clear about the need for men to accept responsibility for both male violence to women and for trying as men to stop it. These are excerpts from the text of their 1991 White Ribbon Statement. If it were between countries, we'd call it a war. But it's happening to women, and it's just an everyday affair. It is violence against women. It is rape at home and on dates. It is the beating or the blow that 1 out of 4 Canadian women receive in their lifetime. It is the sexual harassment at work and sexual abuse of the young. It is murder. There's no secret enemy.
Oh, speaking of sexual abuse of the young, let's not forget that female perpetrators of this kind of stuff are not exactly, punished as harshly as male. And sometimes this is not even seen as a crime by society.
Oh yeah, and that applies to all of this.
Feminists defend them.
Yeah. So while I'm reading this, in your head, gender flip it and just imagine the outrage. Like, for example, any of these stats you were direct at women, men are victims of it even more so, right? So the argument here is that all countries are in constant internal warfare of a magnitude even greater than this, right? Because you have male violence against men. And I would argue probably a near equivalent amount of female violence against men that simply isn't recorded or reported because we just aren't as prone to perceiving female violence or taking it seriously. So, anyway, we'll just get through this part where they're reading from the speech. So he says, there's no secret enemy pulling the trigger, no unseen virus that leads to death. It's just men. Men from all social backgrounds and of all colors and ages. Men in business suits and men in blue collars. Just regular guys. All those regular guys, though, have helped create a climate of fear and mistrust among women. Our sisters and our mothers, our daughters and our lovers can no longer feel safe in their homes. At night they can't walk to the corner for milk without wondering who's walking behind them. Even the millions of women in relationships with that majority of men who are gentle and caring feel that they cannot totally trust men. All women are imprisoned in a culture of violence. Men have been defined as part of the problem, but we are writing this statement because we think men can also be part of the solution. Confronting men's violence requires nothing less than a commitment to full equality for women and a redefinition of what it means to be men, to discover a meaning to manhood that doesn't require blood to be spilled. So, any thoughts on that? Same. I guess we kind of addressed it. It's very silly because violence predominantly affects males.
It just reminds me of a story I heard when I was like 15 from an older guy who actually wanted to join the feminist movement. That's a Freudian slip right there.
Yeah, who died and made you Black Knight?
What's the difference?
And his friend was in this feminist group in Zurich, and he asked her if he could join them, and she brought it up at the group next week. And she said, oh, we still have to think about it. And it took them 6 months to finally say, yes, you can march with us on this demonstration, but you have to be all the way back there. And he was like, fuck you guys. It took you 6 months to take an ally? Like, what's wrong with you people? Why do you hate men so much that even the ones that want to help you take forever to decide to let them
They got
help
Seneca
you? Like,
Falls. That was exactly
I
what they
wanted
did
to
to the
make
man
a
at
joke
Seneca
about
Falls.
to the back of the bus, but it turned out that it was literally what they said. Much in the back. You're a second-class citizen.
Yeah, it's literally back of the bus, but it's also literally, that's what the women at Seneca Falls did, is they told the men, okay, you can come, but shut the fuck up and go to the back of the fucking room, and you don't fucking talk, and you stand there and you fucking listen and you learn your goddamn place. That was Seneca Falls. That's the thing that's celebrated as the birth of the modern feminist movement. Yeah, so shit hasn't changed. Changed 0%. Yeah, that's astounding. Like, just the absolute lack of any awareness. Alright, so there's just one last paragraph here. We'll close this first one out. I find the White Ribbon campaign encouraging because it reassures me that it is possible for men to take responsibility for the actions of their own gender. See, okay, that's funny because own, that means ownership, right? Oh, of their own gender. So she's using the group identity, right? Because that necessarily divorces it from the individual. And could you just imagine, like, we have a movement which is blacks against black crime, and it encourages black people to really take ownership of all of the violence of their own race. Like, could you imagine that being a campaign that somebody writes and they're like, yeah, I'm an academic, publish this in your collection of Nazi essays in 1992. You know what I mean? Like, that's why I say, you compare feminism to Nazism. Feminism does not compare favorably. Like, not at all.
But didn't you hear the story about that scientist who wrote those fake woke papers?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Literal quotes from Mein Kampf.
Yeah, he just replaced the trigger words and Mein Kampf from the Nazi keywords to feminist keywords, and it was accepted and even praised as a very good text.
Well, you see, some ideas are, some things are timeless. Just like, Mein Kampf, the bestseller for all ages. By the way, if someone wants to take this out of context, there's a freebie for you.
There we go. Time says an hour and 50 minutes.
We're dealing with worse shit than that. Yeah, mind. I mean, with worse brainwashing, worse mind control than you can ever imagine. I mean, Mein Kampf is light.
Entry level.
Yeah, it's very light compared to what we're dealing with in today. And people don't want to deal with this. We're dealing with a population that are in denial, the dumbed down, and they don't care. They just want to go about their everyday life. The most popular, looking at the news and the most popular TV show. We're dealing with brainwashing to a max.
Oh yeah, Nikos, we're gonna have
worse than anything Nazi. This whole fair Nazi thing went through. I mean, we're dealing with much worse.
No, I completely agree. And actually, Nikos, we need to have like a conspiracy stream sometime. I think that'd be a lot of fun.
I don't even think I call it reality, not conspiracy.
No, okay,
it's reality.
and I agree. I don't like the terminology.
The thing is, people don't want to deal with reality. That's the problem. So they call it conspiracy. So they make everything a conspiracy because they don't want to deal with reality. It's horrific.
That's the thing, because the term conspiracy theory has this unearned stigma, I think.
Right, and then exactly, and then to the dumbed down population, they can go back to their normal life and not think about what they're what they're being brainwashed or mind controlled of. But it's more horrific than anything anyone can imagine. I'm just putting that out. This whole conspiracy thing, I don't even get it, because it's called reality.
Well, that's the thing. My theory is that because of the effect when most of the time you hear about conspiracy theories that are really, really retarded. So you think that all conspiracy theories are retarded, but let's not forget that. Actual conspiracies happen. Like, remember when CIA was testing drugs on unsuspecting subjects? If someone was telling people that, it's conspiracy theory, you're crazy, but it was true. And it happened. Or like all the other unethical human experiments that were, even like in the 20th century.
Oh, God, yeah. I mean, they've been experimenting on humans.
They admitted to it. It's been confirmed with MKUltra and everything.
Is horrific.
Yeah, for example, people who were unknowingly infected with syphilis, hundreds of people. It was happening like in the 50s and 60s. It's not something that it's not that long ago. So again, just because something is a conspiracy theory, it shouldn't be rejected outright. You should treat it like every other claim. Based on evidence. So if there is evidence, then it doesn't matter if it's conspiracy theory. If it's just someone making shit up, then into the trash it goes.
We should really keep that stuff for another occasion.
Right,
Like,
that was my
we
point.
could
Was
go
we'll
on
make
and
we
on
should make
and
a
on.
separate stream. We can call it
Well, I'm just saying they program people to automatically think conspiracy is but when it's reality, they program people to avoid reality. That's my main point. And what they think and the people that think they're living a reality are living an illusion. Okay, whatever. You can. I mean, yeah, you could whatever. We'll talk about it another time. Whatever you said.
Yeah, no,
But,
because it deserves its own stream. There's enough to say.
I don't get the whole whole topic because to me it's reality. I see every day people that are so mind controlled. So I don't know. Whatever. I mean, everybody's different. So that's probably why I get kicked out of most servers. So who cares? Because I deal with reality on a different level. So that's the problem. Maybe I should go back to the dumbed down people and on their thinking.
Yeah, the only Discord server I got kicked out of was Turbo Autisms for spamming. So I deserved it, and I feel bad. And I hope that one day he'll forgive me.
Well, yeah, if you that's because you go past the normal narrative. Yeah, you get kicked out of anything.
All right, so we got 2 paragraphs left of this bad boy.
Good.
So she concludes with, at the end of Robert Bligh's book, Iron John, the newly revealed baronial king says, I am Iron John, who through an enchantment became turned into a wild man. Any wild man who wishes to be free of the evil enchantment must turn away from himself and from a male-centered world and life and become pro-feminist enough to care about what is happening to women. The truth is, you cannot affirm life without affirming women, because women's bodies are the gateway to life for all of the human species. The men's movement, unless it is embracing of women, their health, their safety, and their equality, will never be a way to life for men. Remember, the beast, to free himself, had to truly love another. So that last paragraph there strikes me as extremely tradcon.
Did they even read the book?
Well, I think she's responding to the Disney movie, I believe.
Yeah, but even in the Disney movie, he had to be loved, truly loved for what he is by another. Not he had to truly love another.
Like,
she sort of alludes to that earlier on in it. But
it's funny how they use fucking fairy tale to illustrate a point. You know, it never actually happened.
Reality doesn't give them the material that they need, so they have to go to the Bible, they have to go to fairy tales, they have to go to ancient Indian or Babylonian myths, because there's nothing there in reality to sustain the point.
Yeah.
Right, well, and she also addresses that. So this is basically Kotaku version 0. Right, and this was like this new movie, Beauty and the Beast, had just come out. So she did basically the Kotaku dance on that movie at the time. So this is actually like ancient Gamergate. It's very funny, but
It's also funny that it didn't really change since then. Like they just keep repeating the same bullshit, and I don't think they will ever tire of it.
Yeah, I'm going to be AFK. I'll be listening for just the next minute here. Mm-hmm. So before I go on to the next one, any other thoughts?
By the way, speaking of the beast who had to free himself by had to truly love another. I think that in the movie it was the other one. Someone had to love the beast, and that the point was that it's a story about Stockholm syndrome.
Exactly. It was the other way around. Like they didn't even get the movie right.
Yeah, and it's you could interpret this movie in different ways. It's kind of creepy because if you want someone to love you, just kidnap them until they love you back. It's kind of stupid, but I mean that's what the story is about. And also, it involves magic and other shit that's not real. At least back then they didn't quote Harry Potter for every metaphor they need to make. Well, nowadays it's like they try to talk about politics with Harry Potter quotes and analogies, and they'll fucking read another book. Oh, speaking of which, I actually let me show like a meme that someone actually made unironically. It's to illustrate this point. Okay, what was it? Oh, it's not this. Oh yeah, there it is. So I'll post it in the comments.
Yeah, post it
Text
in
channel.
comments 3. That's for anything related to anything that's like related to the voice chat.
Oh, comments 3, not
Yeah.
comments.
So comments is just a general default chat area. Comments
Oh.
2 is for anything like not safe for work or spicy, because people wanted a porn channel, and I'm like, okay, that'll be I guess where you put your porn if you want to put porn. And then comments 3, it was for like people talking about things directly pertinent to the stream, which importantly would include anybody who's in the voice channel that doesn't have a working mic that wants to comment. So that's why that needed to be kind of separate. So that's the quick rundown of my 3 comments areas.
Check out this image I posted in the comments 3 channel, because it's kind of to illustrate this point. Someone unironically made this and thought it was didn't make them look stupid or anything.
I don't really get it. Like, what does it even mean?
Well, it's pretty much Orange Man bad.
Oh. This is one of those instances where people say the left can't meme. Because
Yes.
Yeah.
a meme is like a small unit of information that gets a point across using symbolism, basically. Like it's a pictogram that you can add a little bit of text to and people instantly get what you mean. That's a meme to me. And the ones the left do, you would have to do some interpretive dance to even get close to what the fuck they mean.
Well, by the way, to those who are watching this on YouTube, I can describe what this meme is about. It says, if you've ever said you would fight in Dumbledore's army, follow the Mockingjay, or stand up against the Empire, now is the time, motherfucker. And first of all, there's an actual factual error. It shows a picture from The Force Awakens with Finn holding a lightsaber and stand up against the Empire. Finn did not stand up against the Empire because the Empire was defeated like 30 years before that. The enemy in this movie is called the First Order, even though it's kind of like Empire by a different name, but still it's not called the Empire. So
Why didn't they just use Princess Leia? That would have been perfect to their point. Like, they're even too stupid to do that right. Jeez.
Yeah, well, I mean, it probably was made when The Force Awakens was in the theaters, so they wanted to be like, I actually don't know when it was made, obviously after The Force Awakens was released, but, or at least maybe shortly before. It could have been from a trailer. Maybe that's why they mixed up Empire and First Order.
But it's beautiful compared to the mistake they made with Beauty and the Beast and the text. Like, they just show sheer and utter incompetence at understanding basic stuff like fiction. Like, it's not that hard. It's not philosophy. It's not some complex book about economics. It's a fucking story for children. If you even can't understand that right, what the fuck can you understand?
Well, that's kind of accurate. If you look at like film critique, and especially in the media, those movie reviewers, like a lot of them, like very many of them are leftists or SJWs and like that, and you see that they really fucking for people whose job it is to analyze movies, they really suck at it. Like sometimes they misinterpret or just cannot see the various even the simplest messages in the movie. Just their interpretation is way off, or just the symbolism, the very obvious symbolism, just flies over their heads completely, and just.
But they actually turned this around in a sense that they say you have to look at everything through a feminist lens, which is to me just them justifying their inability to look at something neutrally.
Well, that's kind of like
That's typical Hollywood for you. They always look at things, especially nowadays, through a feminist lens. Every movie is through a feminist lens, in Hollywood at least.
You know how it is
positive, like we are doing this right, we are analyzing this on the right level because we're looking through this feminist lens, while you're just showing extreme bias and preconceived notions.
Every movie has to be like this nowadays. It's like every. I mean, it wasn't like this all the time, of course, in the 80s, but everything is through a feminist lens, and if it's not, then you can't. The movie can't be made. That's the worst part about it.
Once they started doing this, like Alien Ripley is really a strong female character, and Sarah Connor in Terminator, she becomes the strong female character, which is still nurturing and caring, but becomes a badass because of the circumstance where you have to rise up against the stuff that's happening. They used to do this right before this feminist lens bullshit started. It wasn't even that hard to have a strong female character, if you ask me. Because you didn't think that way.
Yeah, well, speaking of lenses, when you look through a lens at something, you just never forget that lenses tend to distort. So if you're looking through a lens, then you're not getting the full picture. It's kind of like there's a saying: if the only tool in your disposal is a hammer, every problem looks like a nail. So if the only tool is feminism, every problem looks like the patriarchy. So yeah, that's how those critics fail.
Well, yeah, and it's one of these things that, like, it's very soft, like, analysis of things. There's a lot of wiggle room for kind of just bullshittery, and I think that's kind of where feminists thrive. They're like a fungus, they can really grow and thrive in the damp, moist darkness, But, So I have the next one ready up here.
It's ridiculous. I mean, all the new Disney action movies have to be feminism, or they have to have cultural diversity, which they didn't care back then. And it's so we have this whole new. If it's Hollywood, it has to be accepted through either like this feminism lens or cultural diversity. Like the new Aladdin movie had to be about the woman, they said. Instead of when Aladdin came out as a cartoon, it was about the male. So there's a example of.
And they even forget, like, I mean, I only remember it shadily because I was a kid, but I think Jasmine in the Aladdin original 2D animation movie, she was actually rebellious against her father and being married off to someone. She was actually already kind of a
feminist,
but not on the nose, not in a way that would annoy you.
Right, but to the Hollywood feminists, it wasn't big enough. They had to make it. They had to make the whole movie, basically. But instead of Aladdin, they had to make it about Jasmine.
Jasmine. Well, here's the thing.
This is what we're dealing with.
But there's two things. So first of all, feminists don't like Jasmine because they saw her as ethnic and therefore more sexualized. Because if you compare, if you look at Jasmine,
they should have put a fat, ugly chick in that role.
Well, no, because her outfit is more revealing than most other Disney princesses.
Yes.
And she's
that's
displayed.
just a male fantasy,
Well, here's the thing, though. So she's displayed as more athletic, and this is true of all of the ethnic Disney princesses, all of the non-white ones. Mulan, Jasmine.
Well, you know what the thing is that it doesn't actually matter how the character is portrayed. If feminists want to call it overly sexualized, they will call it. Case in point, have you seen how many reviewers who gave Alita bad scores said that she was overly sexualized, even though maybe they had special cut of the movie, because the one I saw, it was like the least sexualized female character in recent memory. Seriously, where did they? Maybe they overdosed on feminist Kool-Aid and started hallucinating. That explains why they misinterpreted pretty much everything in the movie, or didn't notice the very obviously set up plot points and important conversations. Some things that they. Why you managed to miss that
I totally
was
agree.
referring to Alita as a robot, even though it was said that she had a human brain like twice in the movie, openly. Unless you were like asleep, you couldn't miss this. But if you want to misinterpret things, you will find a way. It's
And that's kind of a lot of this film criticism in a nutshell. But also, Gloves, I want to note really quick. So I mentioned before you had reconnected, I said your audio sounded like it was down. And it sounds like now you have the opposite problem. It's kind of buffered out, so you probably want to adjust it back down a little.
oh, so I'm too loud. So you said that I was too quiet, and
Yeah, and then you
I
re-entered, and like now it's like perfect. So I think that probably overcorrected a little.
Okay, so now I lowered the volume a bit. So okay, so
That's better.
So all this time I was sounding improperly.
Well, I mean,
Something.
honestly, I think you were like we can understand what you're saying, but I figured as long as we're
okay.
at this kind of halfway kind of pit stop, might as well.
Okay.
Um,
Well,
Yeah, and then the other thing was, oh yeah, so the thing is too is with all these like stupid Disney remakes, I'd be totally fine with them doing a movie Jasmine that was entirely a plot that was totally original, centered around Jasmine as a character, right? But that's not what they want.
Yeah.
What they want is to redo Aladdin, but make it about Jasmine, right? Like they want to take stuff that's not theirs, and it's this classic thing where they don't want to make their own new hero. They want to kind of appropriate what's already there and what's already popular.
They know that they have to keep some, like the title, for example. They have to keep these key elements because people will go see it based on nostalgia no matter what, as long as it's called Aladdin. If you called it Jasmine, people might be a bit irritated, and not as many. Still, a shitload of people would have gone see it, so they are very careful about the marketing aspects. But in the movie itself, they do the whole shenanigan bullshit feminist propaganda shit all the way, because as long as they can market it right, like look at Captain Marvel, they told everyone you have to see this movie if you want to understand Avengers Endgame, which was completely a lie, complete bullshit, and it made them over $1 billion telling that lie, selling it that way, even though the movie was fucking bullshit.
Yeah, they'll
Like, not
pay
even
for it in
because
the
of
long
feminism,
run,
it
though.
was bad writing. That was terrible. One of the worst movies ever, period.
Yeah, and honestly,
Well,
I
that's-
wish they'd stop with the remakes. I think a lot of people are in this camp. Like, there's so many cool things they could make into these classic 2D style Disney musicals that people love and cherish. But I guess Princess and the Frog didn't. I guess it must not have sold as well. They had so much more success with Frozen and with Tangled, which breaks my heart because honestly, Princess and the Frog is a better movie. But you know, it's the classic struggle.
Yeah, actually, I was probably still a kid when that came out, and I never heard about it. They never really like that. If they want to go all feminist, that's and the racial minority stuff. That would be the movie I would make if I was a Disney executive, saying, "Hey, we already got this one with the black female lead. We don't even have to change much. We can just do this live action." And they said, "Oh, it wasn't that successful. It's not going to make us as much money. So let's fixate on the ones that were really successful."
Well, and there was
that
no
people love
Disney
and
Prince
cherish.
movie. Where's the Disney Prince? Like, I'd love to see a Disney Prince 2D animated movie. You know, they had like what the very very old like Sword in the Stone. I don't know if that was Disney or not, but it like had issues or something.
Sword
I
in
don't
the Stone
remember.
was Disney, I think.
yeah, it was Disney.
Yeah, but I think that like it like wasn't well received or something. Even though it's very popular, it's very well known. But whatever. All right, let's go ahead and launch into
I
this
mean-
because this is the last essay of this awful book, and once we finish it, I get to take this book over to Mordor, which is the Twin Cities Men's Center, Mount Doom, and I get to cast it back into their library. And when I do this, I think I ordered TFM's book, so I'm gonna read through all of TFM's books so that I can also donate TFM's book to the library. So I'll give them back this awful book, but then I'll also give them TFM's book so that they'll have both available at the Twin Cities Men's Center library.
But one question, by the way, did you mark those passages in that book yourself?
No,
or was
no,
it already marked
I
that
didn't
way?
put any marking on this book whatsoever. So yeah, this was the person who had checked it out before me, which was back in 2002. So 15 years before I checked this book out and basically stole it for like a couple of years, somebody else had marked some of these things, assuming that that's who it was and it wasn't, that's some other
I'm just
person.
wondering if would you get in trouble if you like wrote a little preface on the first few blank pages, warning people who want to read this about what they're getting into.
Well, somebody wrote on the very front of it April 94, and I don't know why they wrote that or what that means. So, I guess a couple
I
of
would
years...
just add some short sentences like, if you really, really want to read this book, be aware it will mindfuck you that this shit was going on back in the days, or something like
Well,
that.
and now I'm looking at the first page of it, the corner is like cut off, and I don't know why they cut that off. It's like it's very deliberate. It's not like it's torn. I didn't notice it until now. It's literally this page is just cut off, and I don't know why. I don't know. Whatever.
Interesting.
Some stupid thing. But anyway. So this is
Let's get on
Charlene
with it.
Stretnack's article. Treating the symptoms, ignoring the cause. Several years ago, the cultural historian Ivan Illich came to the University of California at Berkeley for one semester to present his forthcoming book, Gender. Each week, he held forth in an open seminar in a large auditorium. At the end of the semester, a self-organized panel of respondents who were female professors from various disciplines presented critiques that were unmistakably respectful of Illich's earlier books, but challenged much of the assumptions, evidence, and theorizing in the new work. These responses were presented one afternoon to an overflow crowd as Illich became increasingly disconcerted and alternately leapt from his seat in the first row of the audience, strode up to the aisle and out the door of the auditorium, then returned and took a seat for a while. Afterward, I chatted with Laura Nader, a professor of anthropology who had been sitting next to Illich throughout the presentations. Had there been time for her to ask a question at the open mic on the floor, she told me the issue that seemed central to her was, Dr. Illich, when you turned your attention to institutions, you critiqued the power structure. When you turned your attention to the medical profession, you critiqued the power structure. When you turned your attention to the education establishment, you critiqued the power structure. So why, when you turned your attention to gender, didn't you critique the power structure? Dun, dun, dun. I guess that paragraph doesn't really stand on its own very well. I'm not familiar with this Dr. Illich person, but I guess the gist of it is he wrote a bunch of books criticizing things, and he was a commie, so he just criticized power structure every time. Then he wrote his book about gender, and because he didn't criticize patriarchy enough, all the women were angry. That's basically all I can kind of take away from it right now.
What in the hell?
I don't know. Let's see if she elaborates. Why, indeed. I find Professor Nader's question coming to mind repeatedly as I hear accounts and descriptions of the men's movement. That the privileged sex in our patriarchal society would find their cultural power and position irrelevant to a soul-searching analysis on their part illustrates the very problem feminism has long addressed. Patriarchal culture shapes the socialization of both sexes and also institutionalizes a preference for males and masculine values at the expense of the devalued sex. Today, as before, most members of the privileged sex hold fast to the skewed distribution of power in spite of a new enthusiasm for airing substantive complaints about some of the negative effects of patriarchal socialization for males. Feminism has broken the silence about unjust gender dynamics, but most of the men's movement, and most men in general, continue to stonewall it. While I do not doubt that stronger father-son bonding, a current focus in the men's movement, would be healthier for both parties, achieving that particular improvement would not alter the fact that a man's life in a patriarchal society is eased at every stage by the cultural denigration of women. The playing field on which they win is definitely not level. In the interest of honesty, men might take inventory of all the ways in which they benefit from the collective oppression of women. Men might consider the following questions, substituting real lives for the well-known statistics. As boys, you and others were called on more often in school, taken more seriously, and given more encouragement. Think about the girls sitting among you in class whose lives were pruned and contained. You and other men later began to receive awards, grants, contracts, and other opportunities from sources that routinely give only a very small percentage to women. Think about your female peers who were shut out cold. Most men enjoy salaries that are plumped up by paying women less for comparable work in both the public and private sector. Think about the women in your place of employment, especially the struggling single mothers, who take home less pay than they should. Think about what it means to live in a society in which a man's career is equal in value to a woman's life, as the U.S. Senate confirmation hearings on Clarence Thomas demonstrated. The attitude of the senators and most of the people polled was, even if he did harass you and make your life miserable, you surely don't expect us to hinder a man's career because of that. It was the same refrain that traditionally blocks prosecution of middle-class rapists. Violence against women is epidemic and on the increase. Think about the uneasy vigilance that necessarily shapes daily decision on nearly every woman you know. Men's voices carry the authority in our patriarchal culture. Think about all the bright, capable women you know, relatives, neighbors, acquaintances, who will never be heard as they deserve to be, and who long ago gave up trying. Alright, that led us halfway into the next page here. Thoughts? Well, I just want to note, this Clarence Thomas hearing coming up as they're smoking gun did not age well. Absolutely not. Anita Hill was a liar, and turns out this whole thing is based on lies. You know, women have been privileged in education since the Industrial Revolution, since you let women into education. So, you know, it just took a while for all of the numbers and stats to really catch up to the point where this kind of narrative could be exposed as the utter bullshit that it completely is. And I wonder.
I don't know how bad it was in the early 90s. Like nowadays,
it wasn't.
There's been a UN study about. Sorry.
I don't believe it was. I 0% believe that it was. But sorry, go on.
There was a UN study in like 33 countries, or was it 33? It was a lot of countries, and they actually swapped for teaching. They swapped the names of kids to see if the female teachers graded the kids based on gender, and it turned out that the ones that they were told were females got 30% more, the higher grade for the same work. So right now there's actually a female privilege if you go to school, and that's kind of been proven, and very empirically, they actually wanted to prove the opposite, which is often the case, that they do a study trying to show how women are disparaged and whatever, and turns out reality is actually better for females, and it's just kind of funny, like they have these they can just block out this information, and it's just the way they feel about it. That's what's reality is, how they feel about it. You know, feels over facts.
Yeah, because
they don't get the results they want.
Well, and that's the thing, is that you know, boys and girls are different, right? And because girls hit puberty earlier, this is something that TFM has exposed, which is that in IQ testing, they'll specifically measure children's IQ at an age where boys have not begun puberty, but girls have. And then when they do like these longitudinal kind of studies where they try to you know, test their success later on, they don't re-measure their IQ. And all of this taken together suggests that they understand perfectly well that boys are generally smarter than girls. And they know that if they measure them in this window of puberty, what they can do is they can have stats that say that the girls have higher IQs. So they do this in order to have data that says, oh, look, the girls have higher IQs, so they should have better scores. And, well, why don't they? How come they don't have this success, you know? And basically, it seems like the most logical explanation is that girls are going to naturally not compete as well, right? And then what ends up happening is you have these stats they're looking at in the 90s, and then they promote this narrative that says, oh, girls are oppressed, and then they hear that narrative and then double down on it and then want to promote everything and make everything better, and then we have these insane disparities that we see today. Also, hello, Xiaomi. Lovely to see you. Hey, this is the finale of Academics Respond to Women Respond to the Men's Movement, and if you want to hop on, in my Discord, you can just hop into the live chat there, and then you'll be among us, and I'd be happy to have you. You're someone that I've wanted to have come back on, because you were on here one time, and I felt like I wanted to hear more from you. So, if you're happy sitting in the chat and listening, that's cool. But if you also want to hop on, you're more than welcome. Okay, and then did anyone else have any thoughts on this litany of actual, totally factual statistics she has? Xiaomi, is that you?
Yes, it's me.
All right, I didn't know that was you with your name changed.
Yeah, I changed it.
Well, I guess that explains
Welcome
that
them.
mystery.
Welcome.
All right, so yeah, we're a couple of pages into the last one here, and it's all so typical. It's all so typical. This book is awful. I can't wait to put the final nail in the coffin and give this book back to the Twin Cities Men's Center, and then move on to streams about something maybe a little bit more, I don't know, stimulating. But the goal was to read this entire awful book, and I'm really happy that we'll be finishing that very shortly here.
I just realized that the way the parts where I have been present, like, it really enforces the idea of hunters and gatherers being male and female because they're cherry picking the shit out of their data.
That's funny.
But yeah, maybe just get on with it. I don't know if the other people are AFK or something.
No, I'm here, but don't have anything in particular to say, so I'm getting quiet.
Yeah, I mean, because a lot of it's this very similar pattern where they have a whole body of assumed statistics, and especially in 2019, the cat's out of the bag that a lot of it's bullshit. So that kind of just, it's a house on a crap foundation. And that seems to be the most consistent reason that all of these arguments just fall apart. But let's see if she offers
But they're
anything.
also very good at, like, one statistic comes out that kind of disproves their point, and then they are a bit disgruntled. But give them a week or two, and they're back to making the same claims that were debunked.
Yeah, that's
Like,
why Christina
it
Hoff
didn't
Summers
happen.
calls it
Perfect.
zombie statistics. You keep offing them, and then they just kind of come back to life as though nothing happened. Alright, so she continues, the point of the above exercise is not to generate guilt, but simply to encourage awareness that the persons who live on the privileged end of the dualism that informs sexism, as with racism, classism, ageism, and homophobia, do so at the sacrifice of others. So there's our eco-feminist dog whistle. There's her little pet dog called racism. Getting the bone there. It is not fair, however, to claim that the entire men's movement stubbornly ignores the power dynamics in patriarchal gender relations. One branch is actively involved with political responses to the structural violence, economic and social, in our society toward women and minorities, as well as addressing the direct physical violence women face. An example is Real Men, an organization in Cambridge, Massachusetts. An organization that speaks to men's groups about patterns of violence against women and raises money for shelters for battered women. Another example of work within this orientation is the pamphlet for men titled Overcoming Masculine Oppression in Mixed Groups by Bill Moyers and Alan Tuttle, available from New Society Publishers in Philadelphia, which has been widely circulated in social change movements for 15 years. A second branch resides in academia and focuses on various issues in men's studies. Another branch, alas, is the men's rights movement, which is aggressively misogynist and works primarily to influence judicial thought in the area of family law. By far, the best known manifestation of the men's movement, though, is the mythopoetic branch. Anyway, so that's, Oh, go ahead.
Aggressively misogynist.
Yeah, and it's very silly because, like, if you look at this father's rights movement, like, the big thing they're fighting for is equal custody, right? Is shared custody as the default, right? So you have to prove there's some kind of abuse or some kind of issue or some kind of parental unfitness if you're going to have sole custody, but otherwise the presumption is you have shared custody, which, you know, seems very fair and seems very egalitarian and kind of gender neutral. So it's funny that, you know, opposing the presumption of women's sole custody is somehow misogynistic, I guess.
Yeah, but wasn't that the thing that Big Red said? Like, the assumption that women are the better caregivers is a myth imposed by patriarchy.
Well, yeah, as I said, if the only tool they have is feminism, every problem looks like patriarchy. So patriarchy is like the root of all evil. It's like the devil.
Like those mothers that got sole custody, they didn't want that. They didn't fight for it. They didn't have lawyers. They didn't even make claims, or which might have been false, might have been true. No, it was patriarchy forcing them to be the sole caregiver and receiving alimony. That's clearly the case.
Well, and that's funny too,
How
right?
else could this happen?
Because by that definition, part of patriarchy is this feminist wing that provides these women legal help in order to get all these things. So if you want to smash the patriarchy, I guess you got to smash, like, you know, a good portion of feminism too, don't you?
Yes, but I always admire the mental dissonance these people can sustain. I think my brain would explode if I tried to do that.
I also just want to note about this this group, Real Men. They define themselves basically as stopping violence against women, and they raise money for battered women, right? And it's just like in the last essay we read. You know, it's more of the only way for men to go forward is to define themselves through women. You know, very peak blue pill. You know, and then they wonder where these like incel shooters come from. I mean, mostly they come from like an imagined kind of trend, but insofar as you might say that could be legitimate, I think that definitely this mentality where it's like men can't just be ends in themselves, right? They have to be valued for their utility to women. That's kind of a huge part of the issue here. But yeah, it's also funny
in
that
other instances they turn it on their head and say that's actually the patriarchy dictating that. It's not us. You know.
Yeah, because you can always reverse it. You can always flip it, you know. But
the sole
I'm curious,
purpose of a man is to take care of women and further their causes. Like, of course.
Oh my god, you're still here. Oh, hi guys.
Hey, welcome back.
Hello.
Yeah,
Welcome back.
we're halfway through the last article. This is exciting shit.
Great.
But I'm just gonna note this for later. Overcoming Masculine Oppression in Mixed Groups by Bill Moyers and Alan Tuttle. I'm gonna see if I can find like a PDF of that, because that might be kind of interesting to go through. It's like the APA guidelines version 0.0. Alright, so let's see. Do I have... Okay, so this is page 172. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4... Okay, only 4 pages left, and this is one of them. So she has, the best-known figure in the mythopoetic men's movement is Robert Bly, whose own journey through various explanatory points of view mirrors... What the fuck does that mean? of view mirrors. Sorry, I'm just like pissed. That's a phrase. Whose own journey through various explanatory points of view mirrors, to some extent, that... Oh, I'm sorry, his view mirrors, that's a verb. I was reading it as a noun, so I was upset. Okay, mirrors to some extent that of the movement itself. Hence, a brief survey of that progression is appropriate as a partial mode of comprehending his following. Noting the growing interest in the history of goddess religion, Bly turned his attention to the second half of the 1970s to writing and performing poems on that theme, or at least a variation of it. He traveled around the country giving readings that were billed as being simply about the goddess, but that fixated much of the time on the most bloodthirsty versions, his Teeth Mother Naked, for example, which he had published several years before. In doing so, he expressed the common anxiety of men under patriarchy that the elemental power of the female is essentially devouring and rapacious. He showed no interest in research into goddess forms in pre-patriarchal societies because those orientations regarded cycles of creation and destruction as natural rhythms of the sacred whole, rather than murderous rampages by a demonic feminine. The symbol called vagina dentata, so important to Freud and other patriarchal theorists, has never been found in excavations of non-patriarchal cultures. Woman the devourer, in short, is a projection of the patriarchal worldview. That's really interesting. Have you guys seen the movie Teeth?
I haven't, but now that if you put it in the context of vagina dentata, I probably don't want to see it.
Yeah, that's what. Teeth, the movie, is about a girl who has a condition where there's like she basically has a murderous vagina. That whenever she tries to have sex, her vagina just like grows teeth. It just bites off the dick, right, of whoever attacks her. You know, and it's also like a metaphor, right? It's actually an interesting movie. I actually would recommend it.
I think there's actually a myth in Japan that has the same storyline, basically. There's a demon inside a chick's vagina that bites off the dicks of the people, and then one guy is very smart and he uses a artificial metal dick so the demon loses his teeth. Japanese culture is weird.
But patriarchal. See? And that's her point, is you only see these myths in patriarchies. Otherwise, you see versions of the goddess that have cycles of destruction and creation. Which, like, you know, I think that there's something fair to that, right? Like, the idea of having, like a goddess figure, symbolically, the idea that it has, you know, a cyclical element that involves all of those things. I think that's more kind of in tune with nature and probably, like, more kind of useful in general. So the idea of just like a
basically
one-dimensional...
the European pagan cultures from the north, they had like this nature goddess, which would have this yearly cycle where she would then rebirth the nature every end of April with the wood god, the horned god. So animistic cultures tend to have that view of nature, like, yeah. That's basically animism for you.
See, but I wonder if that culture wouldn't meet the bar for patriarchy. Because feminists seem to just assume that everything pre-feminism was patriarchal. Like I'm not aware of very many feminists that will point to a lot of like things in like prehistory or very ancient old things that say, see, look, here, there was no patriarchy. It seems like all they have is post-feminism, or like bonobos, and it seems like that's just about it. Or like some tiny cultures that like basically sustain themselves on like sex tourism and
those like degenerate monkeys.
Yeah, bonobos are awful. Like if you point to bonobos as your model for how things should be, it's like that's terrible. Bonobos are awful.
Like I don't know that much about them, but I know that they're the way that if we acted like bonobos, we also would live in the trees.
Well, if anyone tells you that bonobo society is, something to be emulated, just start throwing shit at this person, because that's what they deserve.
Well, I think
That's a good
also
one.
they do bite off dicks of unruly males in bonobos, and I think they have gang rape too.
If that's your ideal, get get some. I don't even know. Like get help.
If that's your ideal, ask your doctor if suicide is right for you.
Well, I guess it'd be euthanasia, right? And you know, might be the theory. All right, let's close out this page here. In 1982, Bly launched his effort to employ patriarchal is in parentheses or afterward employ mythology and folktales to aid men under patriarchy. In an interview conducted by Keith Thompson in New Age magazine, Bly announced his discovery of soft men, auditoriums full of young men he encountered who had been rendered too sensitive, too kind, too empathetic, and too wimpy by the forces of feminism. As an antidote, Bly issued a call for men to discover the wild man within. That wildly circulated interview revealed a nonchalant attitude toward male violence against women, a shocking position Bly later moved away from when he expanded his thesis to become the book Iron John. Soon afterward, Bly took a cue from the ritual circles in the grassroots women's spirituality movement, which had been in existence since the mid-70s, and began to teach workshops around the country. In the ritual space created in those gatherings, men spoke frankly of their pain and thereby broadened Bly's own conceptualization of the subject. On one occasion during that period, my women's ritual group spent a weekend in the countryside. As it happened, the fiancé of one of our members spent that same weekend in a Robert Bly workshop nearby, drumming and creating many ritual in the woods. When he entered our house to pick up his, what is this word? Inamorata? Inamorata. Inamorata? His inamorata, the atmosphere was slightly charged, as if the molecules in the room were frozen in awareness that two powerful and compelling orientations were suddenly sharing the same space. What might happen? Actually, nothing much. Somewhat stilted greetings were exchanged, and we all agreed to rendezvous at a country restaurant an hour away by car. At the restaurant, the fiancé, whom we all knew and liked, shared some general information about the weekend workshop, including his rather adamant acceptance of Bly's assertion that very large numbers of men had been rendered soft in recent years. I asked him slowly, in what I hoped was a neutral voice, whether he himself knew any such men. He pondered a while, then replied triumphantly that he had indeed once known a man who fit the description perfectly. This is blah 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 anecdote. Learning from what he heard in the workshops, Bly partially shifted his focus from blaming feminism to blaming inadequate fathering and lack of mentoring for most of men's pain. Still, in 1990, he once again exhibited the habit of blaming the women in any situation. Ooh, do you see that little equivocation there? That was very not so subtle, right? He said, oh, he used to blame feminism, and then he shifted to something else, but then later he shifted back to blaming women. See, she snuck that one little step in there to hide this equivocation of women with feminism. So some things really don't change over 20 years later. In a televised interview with Bill Moyers, Bly spoke of his childhood and his new perception that his mother had fashioned a conspiracy with him in order to cruelly lock out his alcoholic father. Moyers hesitated not a moment before offering a common-sense response. Since alcoholics are known to emotionally withdraw from spouses and offspring, is it not probable that your alcoholic father withdrew from your mother, leaving her to seek emotional warmth wherever she could, such as the relationship with her son? Bly looked surprised, but then allowed that such an explanation might possibly have some validity. Bly's message, modulated considerably since the 1982 New Age interview, but still framed with questionable Jungian assumptions, moved beyond the boundaries of the men's movement workshops to bestseller status in 1991 via Iron John. Okay, so before we get into that, Okay, this explanation, right, where you have an alcoholic father, and then the mom responds to this by being more emotionally attached to the son. Does this not fit into the narrative that women are children, right? It's just that you have an adult father, an adult mother, and rather than this being worked out on the level of adults and where the woman retains adult responsibility, instead it's, oh, well, how does the son cope with it? How does the mother cope with it, as though they're just children being acted upon? I don't know, that just struck me as like very just kind of dismissive of a female's role as a mother, in that situation.
Yeah, there are subjects there.
Acted
They don't
upon.
really, they don't have the responsibility or power to affect the situation. So all of the brunt bears on the, in this case, abusive, or it just says alcoholic. Like, it doesn't even imply that it's abusive. Like, it's implied that it's abusive because he's an alcoholic, but they don't even have to say that anymore. Like, I know alcoholics who are not violent at all, to no one. Yeah, it's weird.
Yeah, and so then there's some responsibility put on the father, of course, but then also on the son, right? Because he's not understanding the mother well enough, right? So basically, he hasn't, I guess, manned up to assume the responsibility that his absent father apparently wasn't able to for whatever reason. But the
Yeah,
other
that's
part
that's
too
some
is
fucking weird mind games, putting the blame on the child. Like, that puts the mother on an even lower level of responsibility than her own child.
right. The other thing too is, so there are two other things I noticed in this last page or so here. So she's making some claims about Robert Bly and the formulation of his theories. So again, a lot of this book just doesn't really stand well on its own if we're not familiar with Robert Bly. I'm only kind of vaguely familiar with it, so we kind of just have to take what we can out of it. But she's making these claims about that he went into looking into goddess movement things and basically appropriated it and then projected patriarchal violence onto women in order to blame women for things. And then that when he did an honest appraisal of the nature of men, he saw the violence within men, but then just turned away from it. So I just wanted to note that was an important claim she's making here. And I think that's why the editor of this book saved Charlene Spretnak's essay for last. That's my theory, is that this is kind of supposed to be a smoking gun. And of course, unless we've read Iron John, unless we're very familiar with Robert Bly, I guess we don't really have much of a way of confirming if that's true or not. The other thing, too, is this idea of two people go to different camps, right, and then are kind of charged up by these workshops and things, and they're conflicted, and then she's describing, the atmosphere was the molecules in the air were frozen and it was so tense. I find this to be completely unrelatable. To me, it's it's just ideas. To me, that's just kind of interesting, But to me, it just strikes me as so distinctly NPC, right? That they're kind of primed for, someone's gonna wrong think, and we have to shut it down. It just, to me, it's so pussy, and I hate it. I don't know. Did anybody else get that vibe from that kind of description, or do you feel that if you have two people in a room who have some big ideological conflict, that it's this paralyzing thing?
It's just beyond me, because I personally can't really empathize with that reaction, because I am always open to different opinions. I don't have to agree with a person. It's always interesting to hear what they have to say. well, of course, there's some extreme examples like actual fucking races that are true. Like that doesn't even mean anything these days anymore. But if you actually encounter someone who really talks about black people and he really, really thinks that way, and I guess then, even then, I just try to leave politely. Never really felt that the molecules were frozen. This is gonna happen. Like, Jesus Christ! Talk about being mentally inept to deal with reality.
Yeah, that's kind of how I feel. Although I wouldn't even say that. I guess if someone wants to be racist, I'm not very bothered by that. I'm bothered if like they're violent about it or like particularly hateful about it. But if they're just kind of like, I want to be left alone, and like, oh well, sorry you feel that way, And I'd wish for a more like a more utopian resolution, but things as they are.
Yeah. Also, your natural reaction is to try to argue with them about how their perception of reality might be wrong and where they might have some semblance of a point, trying to reach them in a way like you have this missionary instinct to say, okay, maybe this person's talking to me openly, maybe I can change their mind a bit about the things that I think they are too extreme about, but yeah.
Yeah, no, and I think that's basically fair. I guess I'm a little bit more reserved in that because, like, so the reason racism is wrong is because you shouldn't generalize too much, right? And like if somebody has
do not judge the individual based on such things. Like every person is their own island, their own story, their own individual.
Yeah, and individuals are.
If you think everyone from a certain group is a certain way, that's just wrong. It's not even.
Right.
It's not helpful to your own reality.
They're too complicated to be reduced down to just like one variable, right? But then at the same time, like if somebody has those views, like I guess you could try to respond. Like if they won't take the individualistic argument, the only other way to go about it is to say like, well, here's ways that group is generally good, but then like you're just engaging in another kind of racism. So it's like if you already accept the individualist premise, it kind of like nerfs you, right? And I wonder if that's part of a sort of prejudicing in favor of like pessimistic racism, which is that the optimistic racism, like people who would be optimistically racist tend to be more individualistic, therefore they're not going to make the case. So I don't know. I don't know how relevant that always is, but yeah, I imagine that most of the people who I guess can stand me are more people who are kind of fairly open-minded. Even if you have very strong views and you're not likely to be swayed one way or another, at least there's kind of a tolerance to diverse opinion, such that you don't feel frozen by the molecules of people being charged from their men's rights conference. All right, so we got a couple pages left, so we'll just cruise on through this and then... Let's see. Wait a minute.
Soldier Freud. Do
I have the last? Oh yeah, I need to change the page. Okay. So she's talking about Iron John. In my view, that book represents an admirable progression in some respects, but is highly problematic in many others. The latter are exemplified by Bly's enthusiasm for Zeus energy as an image of appropriate male behavior. Zeus? He was a power-wielding bully who terrorized both mortals and immortals and often sought sexual pleasure through duplicity and rape. Zeus was no mensch. Moreover, it is noteworthy that Bly builds his ruminations about men around a folktale in which the young male must steal a key, a phallic object involved with social power because it locks and unlocks a man-made object, the door a prisoner's cage. The door a prisoner's cage. I think she means the door of a prisoner's cage. from the bed of the mother. This foundational portion of the plot reflects the central motivation for patriarchal culture. 1. In such cultures, the elemental power of the female body, the capability to bleed in rhythm with the moon, to grow... Sorry.
What the fuck?
The capability to bleed in rhythm with the moon, to grow both females and males from our flesh, and to transform food into milk for the very young, is regarded with fear, envy, and resentment. 2. Men fear that if women gain social power in addition to our elemental power, men will be endangered. And 3. Wresting social, cultural, economic power from women is hence deemed crucial for men in patriarchal societies. This is the partial message of the myth Bly has made central to his men's work for 10 years. Okay, that's amazing. She got all of that from the fact that in the Iron John tale, he steals a key from under his mom's pillow. Like, all of that was basically...
Looks like a penis.
This makes me start to think that Freud was probably right about that whole penis envy thing. Like, I never thought that he was, but for these women it seems to be true. Like, dick's always on their mind.
Yeah, I mean, maybe. I mean, well, the other thing, too, is, so she talks about women kind of have an innate elemental power, right? Women are just in tune with nature, and this is kind of this, like, basic bitch eco-feminist stance, this goddess movement shit. But then she describes power, which she puts together social, cultural, and economic power all together. That's all the same thing, which is very communist. It's very frickin' communist. Because if you want to see a distinction between those things, look at like an autistic computer programmer. They're gonna have economic power without having social power. And like it's trivially obvious to see how these things can be divided out and how like this narrative doesn't make any goddamn sense when you try to group all that together. But like to them they see it all as a package deal.
Reduces female power to only reproductive power. Like they have no other power in this point of view.
Well, no, it's not that way because she seems to presume that women have all the power, and the only reason women don't have economic power is because men steal it from women. And men live in perpetual fear of the fact that women could have all of the power because they have the innate benefit of the elemental power.
So women are the Olympian gods and men are Prometheus stealing the fire from them.
Well, yeah, and like the funny thing is she's not totally wrong because women can trade on, you know, their sexual market value is just based on kind of like their youth and their fertility. They get all that value up front, and then men don't have this and therefore have to learn a trade. They have to do something in order to be valuable. And right, so
yeah.
But instead of seeing that as like a hand men are dealt, she sees it as something imposed.
Well, in this perspective, the value of the woman is what she's been given by nature, which fades.
Yeah, but she's blurring time. She's blurring time deliberately. Like she's blurring time such that like she doesn't recognize that men have to make investments over time in order to gain their social and economic and cultural value, whereas women get it up front. She just kind of sees it as, oh, women inherently have all the power and men must be taking their power from women. And it's like, no, women only gain their power after they can use their quote-unquote elemental power to procure resources from a man, which is why she put all those forms of power together, is because once you secure a man, you get all those things at once in a package deal.
Yeah, like just compare an 18-year-old woman to an 18-year-old man. Like the 18-year-old woman has, like to each his own. She has the possibility to marry, if she's fairly attractive, a very rich guy who is probably a lot older than her, and the 18-year-old guy, he has to do everything he can so he can survive and gain some prosperity of his own. Like that's his only. Is that a privilege to have to work for years and years to get to some sort of social status? Is that a privilege?
Yeah,
being
no,
given nothing.
it's work is what it is. And, the richest woman on the planet got there by divorce raping Jeff Bezos, right?
Yeah.
Before that, it was J.K. Rowling, and I guess J.K. Rowling, Harry Potter's good. Whatever. For what it is, if you like fantasy novels, like,
Yeah.
she did a good job, right? And I could
It's
accept
all
that.
fair. I mean, she plagiarized a lot of stuff, but in a way that is not illegal. So that's what most artists
I don't know.
do. I
I don't
respect
I
that.
see. I don't.
She did the work.
I don't buy that narrative. Like, I know that there's a lot of there's a lot of similarity, right? Larry Potter and the Muggles, but I know that guy he lost the case. Like, it didn't seem like she took enough
Who
from
sued
it.
her? Like the guy who wrote the books of magic? Because that shit is predates Harry Potter by like 10 to 15 years.
No, yeah, it was the guy who
And-
wrote Larry Potter and the Muggles, I think.
Oh no, that's bullshit. Like if somebody should have sued her, it was the guy who wrote the books of magic. But that's too much of a tangent anyway.
All right, well, let's see where she goes with this. Let's see. Okay. I have recently been assured that Bly now sees violence against women as a serious issue. In addition, I was encouraged to see a quotation from him in fall 1991 referring disparagingly to the senators in the Clarence Thomas hearings as patriarchs guarding the old order. That kind of progressive development in his thinking deserves applause. But, Robert, here's the bad news. You cannot cure the painful symptoms of patriarchal culture, such as inadequate fathering by emotionally crippled men who were taught to construct their identity by means of reactive and insecure fixations on being not female, without addressing the causal dynamics of such a cultural orientation. Ever since the Neolithic transformation, when the earth was desacralized in favor of a sky god and patriarchal chieftain cultures gradually dominated Europe, Eurocentric societies have turned away from the felt connections between humans and the rest of nature and have regarded the elemental power of the female body, like the larger forces of nature, as potentially chaotic, engulfing, and devouring. Once that kind of acculturation cuts off males from the mother, female, and nature, men must compensate for their vulnerability of being disconnected by inventing various institutions that simultaneously safeguard one's autonomy, or the autonomy of one's own group, while controlling others. Defense against emotional entanglement becomes a priority. Hence, enormous amounts of attention and energy are spent on the hierarchical power dynamics I cited earlier. Hence the tragic alienation that distorts the lives of oppressors as well as those of the oppressed. Patriarchy is not natural. It is a cultural choice. Many non-patriarchal societies have responded not with fear and resentment, but with true respect and awe for nature and the elemental power of the female body. For a discussion of both types of social orientation, see Female Power and Male Dominance by the anthropologist Peggy Reeves Sanday. Men shaped by our patriarchal culture will never be able to replace the patriarchal dynamics that harm them, or those that harm women and nature, unless they make a deep and lasting peace with their own physicality, their mother's womb body, all womb bodies, the earth body, and the sacred whole that is the generative cosmos. Only then will they feel at home and embraced in the universe. And that is the end.
It's a big oof.
Ugh. So, basically, don't ever hold women accountable for anything or ever treat them like adults until after you have addressed your own physicality, the mother's womb body, all womb bodies, the earth body, and the sacred whole that is the generative cosmos. So once we, solve all the problems in the goddamn universe, then we can look at, blaming single mothers for causing any problem in society ever. It's basically kind of the takeaway. And thank God Robert Bly cucked to the people who were standing up for someone who was falsely accused of sexual assault. You know, great. That was well done, Charlene. Well done. Although I will say
But
that
those are necessary sacrifices, man. They are very necessary sacrifices.
well, I'm just glad that like Kavanaugh and Clarence Thomas that there wasn't much success, right? I'm glad that they're able to serve on the Supreme Court because, you know, people tell me that anarcho-capitalism is so unrealistic, and I'm like, bitch, you're American. Like your government almost got overthrown by a single lying whore talking in a Britney Spears voice, and you're gonna fucking tell me that your government is necessary for social order? Like, no. Absolutely not. 0% do I buy that narrative. So there.
Yeah.
So there.
But I always kind of like things are going south around here, but I always find it quite interesting that people from America or people focusing on America have this perception because in my book, America is one of the most broken countries ever conceived. Like it was a great idea, but you managed to, while fixing some problems, create so much more problems in the last 70 years that it's a miracle that this. I think it's just the economic relevance that keeps it afloat. Like,
yeah, that's all it is. That's
the amount
literally
of
all it
crazy
is.
shit is insane.
Yeah, it's been running on fumes for decades, and no, there's just a lot of fumes to keep running on. So it's going to be a slow and painful death, a very slow, dramatic, painful death, because I don't know, it's the most slowly crashing airplane of all is the American economy. But I thought that this juxtaposition of the sky god versus like the Earth Mother was kind of interesting. Because if you think back to like anything that was like very goddess centric in this whole book, it was always about like the earth, right? It was always kind of going into the darkness and the dirtiness, right? And embracing that, which is I don't know, kind of interesting. But yeah. I can pull
it's
my
always
bingo
this jumping
sheet.
back and forth between statistics and numbers and realities and fantasies and history and myth and current day issues and stuff from 100 years ago, 1,000 years ago. Like, if you have to be this roundabout, you're really grabbing straws at this point. Like, that was fucking almost 30 years ago.
Well, and the other thing, too, is that, you know, Robert Bly is a very kind of complementarian traditionalist, right? So when he's describing these, like, devouring goddess creatures, right? You know, she is looking at that like, oh, how horrible. And then he goes on to talk about Zeus, and she's like, well, that's horrible also. But it's like he's using these kind of flawed, semi-one-dimensional gods for each gender. So it makes me wonder if Robert Bly's treatment is actually maybe kind of realistic and kind of even-handed all around. And yet her takeaway from it is, oh, so you're saying that women are awful and also that men get to be awful. And I suspect that that's a straw man. I suspect, but yeah.
Yeah, well,
we have her author bio here. Charlene Spretnik's work has contributed to the framing of the women's spirituality, ecofeminist, and green politics movement. She is author of States of Grace, The Recovery of Meaning in the Postmodern Age, Lost Goddess of Early Greece, Green Politics, and The Spiritual Dimension of Green Politics, and is editor of an anthology, The Politics of Women's Spirituality. So it's another. She's a Greenpeace witch, basically. I don't even think she would take issue with that. She'd be like, "Yeah, I am a witch, and I do love Greenpeace. Like, thank you."
Well, it's very new age of her. Like, I always in my take on new age people was always like, I take this from that culture, that I like this thing from that culture, I like this thing from that culture, I like this thing from this mythology. I'll just combine all the things that I like, all the things that say what I want to say, all the things I agree with, and
Honestly, I do that.
ultimately,
I do that unironically. If I have a religion, it's cultural appropriation. It's you look at things, you say, I'm taking this, and then people say, what are you taking? I'm like, the stuff I like. I'm taking the stuff I like, and I am not beholden to appreciating the context, or if I want the context, I'll take that too. I'm all about all in cultural appropriation. That's my religion.
well, I do that too, but I'm not that serious about it. Like, I do that for my personal pleasure. Like, I'm not gonna go out teaching or advocating for my combination of things that I find interesting or whatever, you know.
Well, because the beauty of cultural appropriation is you can just say, okay, so whatever you can make the case for being useful, I'm taking that. But anything that I don't like, I'm not going to take also. So, and then if you can make an argument for like, oh, well, here's why you need the totality of all of it, then I'll say, okay, I'll just take all of it then. And then I'll take more things later. So it's very abusive, but you get
Yeah,
to win.
I guess it's all about how you use it or what you use it for.
Yeah, yeah. Anyway, so yeah, this book was fucking terrible. Any closing thoughts on this just terrible fucking book?
It's cancer.
Cancer, right? Just absolute cancer.
I think it's actually quite fascinating, but I said that in the first talk I joined, because I feel, sorry, I feel that it's very exemplar, a good example, a very early example of what's been going on since the early 90s, and it's this machine. I always see feminism used to be a machine that gained steam, fighting for actual rights against actual issues, actual injustices, and once those were achieved legally, like it was law, they had to find new ways to fuel the machine. It couldn't just stop running. You couldn't just say, oh, okay, we achieved that. Now we have to find more problems. And when the men's rights movement caught their attention, they had an enemy. An enemy that was doing what they were doing when they were still doing good. Addressing actual injustices, addressing actual problems, and they can't have that. They can't have this notion of men also facing injustice, men also having problems, men trying to get a fair shake. That can't happen.
Yeah, well, it's the Erin Pitsey story, right? Because she was addressing domestic violence and she had her shelter shut up where she was talking to all kinds of abusers and helping them kind of sort out their issues. And feminists infiltrated it, made it all about women. And as soon as that was the case, they were able to get all this funding. And that's kind of the issue, is when you look at these gendered issues, you say, well, why don't the feminists just become MRAs, right? As soon as they got all these women's rights, they could have just shifted their focus to men's issues. But of course, once you do that, nobody fucking cares. And that's kind of this weird...
That would have happened if they were legit for equality. But apparently that was not their shtick.
Well, it was a great marketing scheme, right? And
everybody agrees that everybody should be equal, like at least nowadays. It took some time.
Well, and that's the marketing scheme for government, too, is they say, well, government is going to protect you against violations of the non-aggression principle. It's just a marketing ploy. And it's because we all kind of understand that we accept that, people should have equal opportunities and should be treated fairly and should not be aggressed upon. But of course, you can kind of have your cake and eat it, too, if that's your narrative and that's what you're saying you promote. It's much different to actually promote it.
It's really hard to argue against that unless you're an open bigot, you know?
Yeah.
Nobody can really disagree with people should be treated fairly. You want to be treated fairly, like that's a basic. Don't do unto others what you don't want to have done unto yourself.
Yeah, and if you're somebody who doesn't accept that, you're probably willing to accept that you should pretend that's what you should say you want and then just not do it, you know?
We kind of instilled that into people. That's why in another conversation yesterday, someone talked about censorship. They said maybe we should allow people to say bad words, which I'm not going to quote for the sake of the stream, because then they can show themselves for who they truly are, for what they truly believe. Because right now, every racist, every bigot, every xenophobe knows what to not say in public. So they can hide in plain sight because we made it actually illegal to say some of these things.
Yeah, well, and I wish they didn't have to, honestly. I wish that people could just kind of be honest. Because, like I said, I'm very permissive that way. And the thing is when I express these views, I find that most people I encounter say, yeah, that makes sense. I kind of agree with that. Yet, you know, someone like me could never, like, be a politician. It would just be so unpopular. And I don't know if maybe I just have a selection bias of who I talk to. Or if maybe there is kind of a silent majority who, you know, understands that we shouldn't have things like forced association or whatever. But I'm glad that you had brought up about this book, that it's an interesting snapshot into the past. And that was why I thought it was so important to kind of dig this out and read it when I found it. Is because so many people think that the men's rights movement just kind of pooped into existence around 2012 or 2014 with Paul Elam and AVFM. And, like, to some degree, that's true, but that's not the whole story. It's been a thing for a very long time. And once you realize that, we start to kind of realize how intractable this problem is. And ultimately, I think we just need a plurality of voices and a plurality of approaches. So I'm very accepting.
I just hope it works in cycles. Because at the early 90s, these people were very vocal, very present, very demanding in public, and they kind of got shut down by society, saying, that's bullshit, that's too extreme, we can't have that, political correctness is insane, and it went quiet for a while. And nowadays we know that most of these people that were very vocal, they went into academia and now are teaching gender studies and or are in leading positions. And now they feel empowered because they have influence and control over the academics, over the young generation that studies.
I just think that they've always been in power.
Go back.
They've always been in power. They've always been winning. I don't think they've had any real losses. They're sort of kind of losing the cultural battle, and we're always tempted to say, oh, this is the final nail in the coffin, feminism's finally dead, but I don't know that. I really don't. I don't know. I'm a little pessimistic. I think that the real enemy is gynocentrism, and it needs to be named and exposed. And
well, but
we don't know if we can ever solve it.
They don't have to do anything to keep that alive. I think it's actually in our genes to be gynocentric. The evolutionary science, or just basic biological science, implies that men are worth less than women for the survival of the species. And that is true.
I think we can overcome it. I'm white pilled on this issue. I think we can beat gynocentrism, and maybe that makes me, I don't know, utopian or idealistic, but that's the route I want to take. I want to say, you know what? Let's confront this, name this, and try our best to shut it down. But let's not just say that it's something in our DNA. You might be right, honestly. You probably have more evidence than I do, you know?
No,
but I don't want to believe
respect, it. And I support your idea. We have to struggle to stop gynocentrism. Unlike the things that were mentioned in this book, I think gynocentrism is very deeply rooted and probably evidently rooted in biology, but look at what we're doing right now. We're talking through microphones, through the internet, through computers and smartphones. None of that is dictated by biology or nature. We have transcended that centuries ago. Basically, when the fire and wheel became a thing, that was when we said bye-bye to nature and bye-bye to bonobo-style cultures. And I guess we can strive to make it better. We can strive to end gynocentrism and make a truly equal society.
Yeah, and like once humans had the wheel and had fire, you know, there we go. We just greenlit transhumanism, right? Technology is transhumanism, period. And, you know, we think faster than we evolve, but, you know, maybe we technologize faster than we evolve, and maybe our technologizing helps us evolve faster. And, like, the one thing that defines humans is our ability to think and to technologize, which I don't think that's a word, but fuck it, I'm coining it.
It's probably the only thing that raises us above the level of mere animals.
Yeah, well, that was Aristotle, I think, defined man as the rational animal, which, you know, has its problems. It's simple, but there's an elegance to the simplicity. But, yeah, that's what I think is, you know, we have to name the real enemy gynocentrism, and that's why I'm writing a little novella, and the premise of my novella is that it's a post-feminist world, but they failed to address the problem of gynocentrism. And it's sort of like we have this kind of soft egalitarian society with some futuristic technology, but it's kind of dealing with the fallout of not going radical enough to really challenge the fundamental problem. So there's a serial killer and a crazy court trial, and it's in Pakistani. So hopefully it'll be something kind of precious on its own. And once I finish it, I think I'll just put a PDF up somewhere so no one will have to buy it. I'm just interested in seeing if people like it. But anyway, I said I was going to stop talking about it and just actually try to write it. But, you know, easier said than done.
Yeah, but certainly do finish that. I guess I would like to read that. Kind of reminds me of that Outer Limits episode with the guy. I don't remember if he was frozen or if he time traveled into a future where there were no men left. I think it's a science fiction story from the 50s. They turned into a TV show episode in the 80s or something, or the 90s. There's a lot of good stuff in Twilight Zone and Outer Limits. A lot of great concepts that should be elaborated and discussed more. But I like that one specifically because at first didn't realize it was a man because the women in that future weren't exactly feminine. And right now the race is between the artificial womb people and the artificial sperm people. Weird stuff. We don't really need either of those, but hey, let them develop what they want to develop.
It's just interesting because most people, at least in my circle, we always think of the future as, oh, once we have the artificial uteri, then women don't have to exist anymore. So it's like the opposite. But anyway, I'm fucking glad this book is done. But yeah, so the basic things were communism, ecofeminism. They take all their stats for granted, and it's just freaking awful. And the point was you had these men who were hurting from these issues, and then these women's response to it was just to talk about how if only you'd actually just make it totally, completely about men, then we could solve all of our problems. And how dare you not just think about only women. So...
Okay, just arrived. I'm glad I made it to the end of it. Godspeed to all of you. Bye-bye.
Whoa, your voice just got all fucked up. I don't know if that was...
What was that? It's like a demonic chanting or something.
Okay, you heard that too. So, it wasn't just me.
Did Satan join our chat?
Now he's muted. So Glebs, you've shamed him. You've completely shamed him.
Oh, this was this was the weirdest sound ever. If I was making a movie, I needed someone to voice a demon. This effect would be perfect.
So this picture on the stream right now, this is the actual still image that's taken that creates my avatar. Karen Strawn thought it was a sewing machine. It's actually a pile of clowns and an InfoWars sticker in the middle. And that's the avatar I use. So I like clowns. I've always loved clowns. I think
Clown
they're very
world.
misunderstood and they just want to make people happy. So, and I find that relatable, that they're just these joyous, kind of aloof people, and they just want to make the world brighter, and that people, all they can do is shit on them. So, that's why, I guess to me, the clown is very relatable, so people can read into that what they will, but... Even the actual killer clowns, I'm like, you know what, maybe they're just misunderstood. I think the most watched video I made in 2019 was my video about Art the Clown. Have you guys seen that movie, Terrifier?
Mm-mm.
Oh my god, it's so freaking good. If you have Netflix, it is the best movie. It's literally my favorite movie. So it's called Terrifier, and it's about a killer clown, and he's a mime clown. And so he never makes any noise. Like, even if he gets hurt or stabbed or whatever, he makes absolutely no noise. And he carries around a big bag with all these, like, crazy weapons with him, right? And he's super funny. Like, he does, like, funny, mimey things, right? But the entire time you can tell, like, this guy's fucking crazy. He's obviously trying to fucking murder a bitch, right? So, anyway, it was, like, a very uniquely... satisfying experience to watch that movie because it's like a solid slasher movie, you know, with its confrontations and like its jump scares and its chases and everything. You know, it's got its fair share of gore or whatever, but it does it in like a really interesting kind of stylistic way. So yeah, all around, I say Terrifier might be like hands down like my favorite movie because I do love horror movies. Like because like if a horror movie is bad, then it's funny, so it's good, and if it's good, then it's good, is how I feel about them. So, I 1000% recommend Terrifier. It was available for free on YouTube for a while, but I made a whole theory about Art the Clown, which is that he's a demon born of revenge from circumcision. And I didn't just like make that theory up as a troll. I legitimately think that there's a lot there, and I have like a lot of evidence and a lot of points, which I'm not gonna repeat it all because like I made a whole fucking video about it. But there was this guy who went through Silent Hill and basically said that all of Silent Hill was a metaphor for circumcision and just like went off the fucking rails and just like made it all about that and like would spam the wiki with like his massive theories about it. And like it just became this like awesome spectacle just due to his pure commitment behind it. And like I 1000% endorse that as just an approach to intactivism is that like the if we can find the most weaponizable autists in all of reality and then they're intactivists and then just like tell them, hey, go find any media, find any TV show, any movie, any video game, and find like the fan pages for it and just spam it with your like crazy unhinged theories about how it's actually all about circumcision. Just do it and just make like a massive spectacle of it just to get attention. I actually think that's an extremely useful and kind of viable path for intactivism. Does that make sense to anyone else? I think, Nikos, I know that you're on board with that. He probably walked away from the thing. He's probably just listening. Mm-hmm. All right. Well, we got through the book. We got through it a a little bit quicker than average, because usually it takes a couple of hours just to get through one of these stupid essays. So I think what I'm going to do is end the stream here. But of course, we're all sitting in the live chat, so if we want to just hang out and just chat kind of naturally off stream, obviously, that's super coolio. Does anybody want to kind of quickly, you can like say goodbye, and if you have like, you know, your YouTube channel, anything you're working on, anything you want to shill, you know, I'm more than happy to let you shill that out here on my humble platform.
Oh, cool.
Well, I have a YouTube channel, Privilegier Sheevlord. Just search for Sheevlord, you'll find me.
Oh, yeah. And I have a YouTube channel as well. It's a new one, Azura Allure. And I'll be doing game streams on that one.
I didn't even know about that. Azura Allure?
Yeah.
Let me find that. Let me see.
It's one of my eThought stage names.
Wait, so what? How do you spell that?
It's Azura and then Allure Allure.
Oh, there we go. Oh wait, I am subscribed. What the fuck? When did I wait? This isn't because you have Miss Mystery and then you have this one.
Yeah, Miss Mystery is like my main one.
Oh well, shit! I'm already subscribed to this, so I'll make sure I add both of these to the description here. I'm gonna put all these together into like a playlist, and I think I might make thumbnails where they're each like numbered or whatever, or something fucking gay.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and end the live, and then we'll just chill out in the Discord. Anybody who may be listening who's not in the Discord, the link is on my YouTube channel. If you want to hop in there, you know, you're more than welcome to hop into our voice channel. All right, everybody, keep it easy. Put the word to the mother, and I'm so happy that I'm done reading this entire fucking awful book.